ahead and push this live.
Cut the font. Looks great. Sound?
Yeah, sounds good too. I'm about to check the sound right now. All right.
So what do you think? The flag is visible or not?
Yeah, that's the feed right there.
Okay, do you want me to move the red one a little bit out?
No, that'd be good. Because if
Yeah,
we don't want to see all the speakers though over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the most important to have the flag.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing? All right. It's perfect. All right, everybody. Welcome.
live? Is it live?
Live, we have people tweeting and everything, live chat.
Look at that. Bill de Blasio is now an MSNBC contributor and the mayor of New York. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. This is a crazy night, as I'm sure you're seeing. We're seeing the results for it. My name is Nomiki Konst. I am the host of the Unifying show, for those of you watching at home. We are here live in downtown LA in this magnificent space that I believe has been converted, part of this downtown renaissance, and I just think we have to take notice that there's these beautiful things happening in LA, not just organizing, but people renovating the city and investing in the local communities, which I think is super important. So this is the kind of space I think that does well for downtown LA. So I want to thank you all for coming. Bearing the traffic. I got in a car accident on the way over. Sorry, Mom. My mom was in that. It was a messed up car. By the way, I feel like that is a great metaphor for tonight. So, no, but for real. For those of you who don't know about the show, we are a little over a month old. We have, last week I did an update, not even a week ago, and I said, oh my God, we've got 25,000 subscriptions, and we've almost doubled that in the last 5 days. And that's because I believe, when you watch MSNBC or NBC, as we know, they're not always giving us the true picture of the country. And as we know too well, they are influencing the outcome of our democratic process. And I say democratic basically in quotations because we, as a movement, are doing so much to try to transform this process, and that is what we want to do on this show. We want to pull back the curtain on how the Democratic Party functions, how it's structured, who's funding it, what are all those organizations that are out there messaging things to communities and putting people on TV that don't say that they're consultants for weapons manufacturers. We want to share that with you so that you know what we're up against. And then also so that you have the tools to go out there and fight and message to your communities and to your families. And I think what we're doing tonight is just the beginning of many more of these where we can give another narrative, where we can bring people to a different place on election night. And hopefully we can do more of these in person with live shows so we get to know each other, our neighbors, and also on air. And I want to thank everybody on the Michael Brooks Show who's watching. And we're about to stream live with the Majority Report with Sam Cedar. And we have these incredible hosts and panelists who are coming out tonight to expand that ecosystem. Because one thing I'll say, having been in this space for a long time now, seemingly a long time because it's online, there's solidarity. There is true solidarity. We are not competing for ratings. Michael is streaming, I'm streaming, Sam Cedar's streaming, we have people going on TYT tonight. This is about locking arms and understanding that we grow with each other. Every single video we share is a way that we communicate and share the message, the counter message to this propaganda, this corporate propaganda. So you guys, you know that. And I just want to personally thank you. And I want to thank everybody who volunteered tonight, including my parents, to James, who's bartending. Tip your bartender. To Harry, to Kathy, to Bonnie, to Jill. We got a whole crew out there. And of course, to Sam, who's producing this night. He's behind the scenes making everything happen. West Coast Sam. So, with that, are we doing the streaming? I'm supposed to look Are we good to go? Is the majority report ready?
David Dye.
David Dye. Okay, let's do it. David Dye, are you ready? Yeah, come on out. We're gonna get a little update on what's happening. Oh, nice. Hi, let's go. So this is your spot, David. I think that's it. We got the table for the laptops. So David. That's on.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I understand how this works. You have a white guy with glasses who want me to give you Kornacki and tell you the information. I understand this is what us white people have to bear. You know?
David,
We're so underprivileged.
we don't have a map for you to touch. We think you're smart.
No, that's
you don't need to be like, this is Minnesota. And no, you can, these
Can
are
you
smart
envision
people.
the map of the United States in your head? Well, one
David,
thing.
where do you work? Let's talk about that
Yes,
before we go.
I am the executive editor of the American Prospect.org. Thank you. And, you know, I'm on Majority Report a lot, I'm on TYT a lot, and now I'm here on your show. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for having
coming
me.
tonight.
Yeah.
So let's get a brief little update on what's happening across this country. California has not, the polls have not closed yet.
Right. I
It's a big
mean,
deal.
one thing to consider is that time zones are working against the narrative here. So on the East Coast, states, you know, I mean, Super Tuesday used to be called the SEC primary, as you know, named for the Southeastern Conference, because it was normally when all these Southeastern states would vote. And that's what we had, beginning Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, most of them in the Eastern time zone. And then there were a couple Northeastern states, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts. These states where Sanders is projected to do very well, Texas and California, show up a little later in the calendar here because of time zones. I mean, literally, you're still. Has everyone voted, by the way? If not, there is a polling station like 5 minutes from here, and go get in line, because if you're in line by 8, they can still.
That's great.
They will still count it. So, you know, the fact that those, and those happen to be the big delegate presence, right? That they have the most delegates tonight. So the narrative of this ultimately will be a little delayed. Number one, because of the decisions that were already made on the East Coast kind of drive what the media is talking about. Number two, especially because of California, which takes a long time to vote. Everyone here who's from Los Angeles knows we take like 8 months, we go through runes, we do all this stuff before we, you know, nail in the vote. It could take weeks to know the actual delegate map.
Why is that? Because, you know, you've had early voting, which seems, okay, so you guys have been voting for a while.
Yeah.
That's great. Why wouldn't we have a better sense of where people vote if so many people, I don't know the percentages as of yesterday, but so many people have voted ahead of time?
Right. A large percentage of Californians vote by mail, and you can turn that in, as long as it's postmarked today, you can get that in and that will be counted. So there will be votes streaming in over the next week, and people being procrastinators, a lot of them come in late. And so, you know, it could be a week from now before all the various centers get the actual votes, and then they're very deliberate in the counting. They have to match the signature to the signature on file in the county office. So it just always takes a long, long time, and those delegate numbers shift over the course of the weeks in which they're being counted. So the numbers that will be given tonight aren't necessarily the numbers that will be at the end of the process in about 3-4 weeks.
So how does that affect, I feel like we know the answer to this, the media narrative? I mean, if you have states that do not have early voting, that may not have high mail-in voting, maybe some smaller size states that might have a big city, you know, a decent delegate count on the East Coast compared to the West Coast that might have a different demographic process.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we don't want to sugarcoat it, right? I mean, there was a Biden surge here, and it's particularly pronounced in states that did not have a lot of early vote, right? Because, you know, Colorado went pretty immediately to Bernie because half that vote was done before the South Carolina results were even made. So, and the same thing here, and to an extent the same thing in Texas, which has a lot of early vote. So, you know, that's definitely a factor. You know, Biden won some states that he was not necessarily expected to win tonight, and I think we have to acknowledge that. We can't hide from that.
Like which states? Let's do.
Well, Minnesota, for example, obviously Klobuchar was expected to win when she dropped out. It wasn't clear if all those votes would transfer to Bernie, and they did. Massachusetts was seen as a Bernie-Warren two-person race. Biden ends up winning Massachusetts. I don't know if that's been called by everybody, but he has a pretty healthy mood there. And Warren's actually in third in Massachusetts.
Wow.
Maine.
What is the percentage in Massachusetts right now?
Right now, there's about half the vote in Massachusetts. Biden's at 33, Sanders at 26, Warren at 21. So the delegate math will be pretty close, but I mean, there's half the vote. Maine is another state where Sanders was pretty much expected to win. This is a northeastern state, New England state. Right now, it's a dogfight. Biden and Sanders are pretty much even. With Warren 17, so that's about half in. So, you know, I mean, the Biden surge is real, and it does seem to me that he has done best in states where he hasn't shown up at all. The states that got to know Joe Biden were Iowa and New Hampshire. And we know what happened in Iowa and New Hampshire. The states he stayed away from, like the Maines and Massachusetts, they went off their general impression of Joe Biden and the sort of signaling effect of large, you know, important endorsements, and that's what happened. What we, I think, know is that it's going to be a two-horse race going forward, and the next month has almost all of the states that are actually going to be important in the general election. The only states you're going to hear about between now and November all vote in their primaries in the next month. You have Michigan in a week. On the 17th, you have Arizona, which is actually a tipping point state. Beginning of April, you have Wisconsin. And at the end of April, you have Pennsylvania. And who those states decide is best equipped to take on Donald Trump, I think is not just rhetorically important, but I think is substantively important. And we're not, Biden's not going to be able to hide in the weeds as much. This is going to be something where he and Sanders are really going to have to put their records and their personalities on the line against one another. And we'll see what happens. So,
Even those states, I mean, Arizona is a western state, but when you look at Pennsylvania, when you look at Michigan, for instance, are these states that have, you know, more traditional establishment Democratic parties that could lean and organize towards Biden?
well, I mean, Bernie won Michigan in 2016. It was close. It was like 49-48. Bernie won Wisconsin by a lot. The electorate that's turning out for Bernie is very well situated with the electorate of Arizona, which is heavily Latino. Bernie has been winning. I don't know what the numbers are tonight. I haven't dove into the exit polls. But in the early states, Bernie has been winning white working class voters.
That's interesting. And that's Biden's whole thing.
Even in South Carolina. Even in South Carolina, Bernie won white working class voters. And of course, in the Rust Belt, that's going to be incredibly important. And I'm sure others will speak to the fact that, you know, the delegate math, the big states, you know, are still coming in. Texas, California, Florida, Illinois, both of which vote, I believe, March 17th. Other big states. And then New York down the road. Those states will be incredibly important to the delegate math. I just think that substantively, let's let the states that actually are on the line in the presidential election have a voice in who the nominee of the Democratic Party should be.
So let's go back to 2016 here, and I apologize for checking my phone. I'm checking to see if we have the stream in Sam C here. I'm not being, I'm not trying to be rude at this. That's my signal. So our Sam, West Coast Sam, if we have to stream in, try to get right in front of me and wave me down so I can signal to that. We have a very complicated system here. So these states that are coming up in 2016. Was this the same excuse Hillary Clinton made against Bernie?
What do you mean by excuse?
Well, I mean, I say this because we're hearing the centrists say, well, Bernie Sanders, he wasn't the front runner last time, and he was making the opposite excuses about the electoral strategy, meaning some states worked for him later on in the game, and we had to wait for California because he was supposed to win it. And this time around, there's a different scenario. He obviously won New Hampshire, he won Iowa, and he did not win Iowa or Nevada last time around.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the calendar set up pretty well for Bernie early, obviously. He took a majority or he had plurality in 3 states in terms of voters, first 3 states. So it set up pretty well. However, obviously with the South voting and clearly African American support in the South, in South Carolina it was definitely signaling from Jimmy Clyburn, very powerful and important member of Congress, majority whip, number 3 in the House, leadership, and that carried over. And it was a short window between South Carolina and Super Tuesday, and that it looks like helped Biden. I mean, some people thought, well, he's not going to be able to ramp up so quickly 3 days later, but I think it might have helped him because the balloon wasn't deflated yet. So I think it ended up being a support to him. But I think we got to wait to see what the delegate math is. We got to wait to see who's. I would imagine that they'll be close to one another by the end of this process. By the end of Super Tuesday, Biden and Sanders will be very close to one another in terms of total delegates. And then you have these states that are critical to this general election. Let's see what they say.
Has there ever been a nominee who has not won one of the first 3 states?
Clinton.
There you go.
Yeah, Clinton. Iowa was kind of by default in '92 because Tom Harkin was in the race. He was Iowa's favorite son, so nobody competed in Iowa. And then there was New Hampshire, where Clinton finished in second, pretty far back, and he called himself the comeback kid. And it wasn't until much later in the race that he sort of ramped up through, by the way, similar territory as Biden, the SEC primary, the southern states like Georgia and Alabama and Arkansas. So it has happened before. It certainly can happen again. The Democratic establishment is pulling out all the stops to make it happen again. And we'll see what happens. But Biden is going to get a second look now, a little closer scrutiny than he got, in the last several. I don't think he's been seriously challenged in the debates in September.
No.
So he's going to get a more serious look. It's going to be a one-on-one race. Bernie, who likes to sort of, say, Joe Biden is a friend of mine, he soft pedals it a little bit.
Come on, Bernie.
He's going to have to run against Joe Biden.
He's going to have to run against Joe Biden.
He can't run against a shadowy, unnamed force called the Democratic establishment. His competition is Joe Biden, and he's going to have to run against him.
What do you think the message, I guess we're going to have to see the numbers here because, one thing that Bernie Sanders has campaigned on is he says he's going to mobilize, he has to mobilize a new demographic of voters. He has to bring in younger people. He has to bring in folks who have not turned out and vote. But one thing that I think he hasn't done as well this time around, except maybe in places like South Carolina, is keeping that white working class voting base that he had last time. And if you're going against Joe Biden, who argues that he has that base, he might not have the right coalition.
Certainly what you've seen is that Bernie did very well in 2016 among rural whites. And that has fallen back a fair bit this time around. Now, his competition in 2016 was like anathema to rural whites. So, I mean, that's part of it, right? And Biden doesn't necessarily express that, regardless of what you think of his policy. So that's, I think, one thing. One little bit of news I want to break to people is that NBC is reporting that Michael Bloomberg will be reassessing his campaign tomorrow.
I don't know about that, guys, at this point.
I know. You know
Let him waste that oligarch money.
Let me say something about that. That if you can take a silver lining from the last week or so of this election, it's the fact that America got a good look at an oligarch, and they rejected him in the strongest way. He literally had to go halfway around the world to win a state. That was American Samoa. No one in America wanted anything to do with Michael Bloomberg. And, you know, this is something where progressive messaging about Michael Bloomberg actually opened the eyes of people and took him down. And if there's any silver lining to take, it's that there's a line that America might not cross, and that's someone buying a presidential election. So that's something to keep in mind.
Well, overtly buying.
At least overtly.
Because we've got to be real.
At least out of his own pocket.
What happened in the last 3 days with Biden's momentum has been astonishing. I mean, he won a state that we all knew he was going to win. He got endorsements from 2 candidates that we knew were going to endorse him, and it was like, oh, he's the front runner now. He didn't win Nevada by wider margins than expected. He didn't win New Hampshire and Iowa. I mean, 3 states in a row is no feat in the Democratic Party. But of course, the media got on board with Biden's momentum.
I mean, I heard a funny tweet about Biden that after South Carolina, it should have been like the Oscars. Like, this is his 3rd campaign and 1st win. You know, it's been a long time for Joe Biden to drag, for Joe Clyburn to come out and drag him across the line. But you know,
Oh, breaking news! All right, well, we're gonna get some breaking news on this right now. Bernie has won California.
Yes, AP has called it. They called it immediately. It's going to be a lot of how big this victory is, and actually the key here is who's viable, right? Because there's that 15% threshold, and I'd say the other 3 candidates, Biden's probably over it, but it's unclear where the other candidates lie on that. And that's going to be very critical in terms of how much he's going to win out of it. But, you know, I mean, it looks like, oh, Biden won 7 states. I don't know how many exactly. The city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, has more voters than voted in the first 4 elections. The numbers matter here, and this is why it's likely that Sanders and Biden are going to really be neck and neck, and now it comes down to the 2.
Right. And it's interesting, NBC has not called yet. I'm curious if there's any way, if it's not too late, to put up just like the NBC.com rather than the imagery, just so we can get a better sense of like the breaking news, if it's possible. If not, we'll leave Chris Matthews is replacing up there. All right, so while we're shredding Chris Matthews, what would Chris Matthews be saying right now?
Central Park!
It was Castro. That's who did it.
They might shoot me in California,
I was
but
crossing
Philly, so I can do
the Golden Gate Bridge, and they tried to throw me off the bridge. So you know, while we're waiting here, because we're going to jump on with the majority report, let's bring out Ilona Minkowski. Can we signal Ilona? Come on, we're just gonna. It's Johnny Carson style. Ilona Minkowski. Come on board. So Ilona, take it out. Hello. We're figuring it out here. It's our first live show, so and things are happening. Can you guys keep it down back there? Stop laughing. What's going on? So Ilona, you know, we're talking about how the media obviously is getting so much wrong. But David has rules.
I can give you a couple exits. Apparently.
David is allowed to interject at any moment because he's got the information.
That's the white guy who loves mansplaining at any moment. So apparently, Bernie took, in California, according to the exit polls, 55% of the Phoenix vote and 72% of the youth vote. And Biden's, by contrast, among 18 to 29-year-olds, 5%.
5%.
72 to 5.
Well, if there's one bright thing about moving forward, as I'm sure you'll echo, you know, they might have a little bit of control right now, but if signs are showing us anything, the next generation is going to be a completely different generation. Pete Buttigieg does not speak on our behalf. If I hear one more person say, oh, he has a bright future. With who? Like every think piece on the internet? Yes, every Ezra Klein think piece. So Ilona, you know, you have had so much experience in the media, and you are of, where, I don't, come on, we're like the same, I'm older than you. You know, you've had a lot of experience in what would probably be like the mainstream media, right, as we would call it. But you have been taking on the establishment's messaging around specifically your background, countering the misinformation out there because you are of Russian descent. So I think this is really important in this election because we've seen smear efforts, not just here, it's happened abroad as well, where the centrists are throwing out misinformation about Bernie Sanders and his supporters being aligned with Russian interests. You saw it in the last couple of weeks. And it may or may not have affected the polls, we don't know, but what's your take? Being somebody who has been poo-pooed by the corporate media that you worked in for so long.
Poo-poo is a nice way to put it. It's like cock blocked.
I need another sip of my spiked kombucha.
What's so interesting about it to me is less even, just what's happened to me, but the way the language, the messaging is used always in our political system, any political system, to scare people.
Right.
And so with Bernie Sanders, with what's happening politically, the current movement, I've had a lot of conversations, older generations. And I feel like there's just so much fear mongering and that results in so much fear from these people about the idea that everything being related to socialism. And I hear it from two different sides. So one is like the the side of my family, people I know who are American, who grew up with this Cold War mentality, just seeing what the Soviet Union was, what communism was then, and so to them Bernie Sanders represents this kind of existential threat that they also grew up with, because they haven't been able to take their mind and put it into the current context of what his policies are, what he's trying to promise. And then I also have my own family who grew up in the Soviet Union, who lived through the most totalitarian, awful version of what an ideology could become, who were also freaking out. Right. And I find myself having to do this kind of explanation with them. We're like, okay, first of all, social programs that actually benefit people, that just touch on core needs of society, like healthcare, like education. You can have that without it turning into this like totalitarian nightmare. You not have to be one and the same and go hand in hand.
Are they getting this information from the media here, or are they? I mean, this is what I think is so interesting. Is you have a lot of people who come from, they've escaped communist oppression. I mean, like Mao. I mean, really, my family, a couple of generations, but they're getting when they come to America, it's like they suddenly are buying the smears about where they come from, rather than hear from their own people. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of speaking to other people, within your own community. Yes, definitely on the media, the socialism is the dirty word, and Donald Trump's going to use it the entire election. We've already seen him, using that kind of messaging starting from a couple of years ago. Right. That's just how they're going to freak people out. I think it works on the Democratic establishment too, as we see, now leading to certain results. And so, just like, my point there was that A, it doesn't have to be this horrible, scary thing, and then B, you have to really put yourself in people's shoes these days, because my generation of a millennial, Gen Z, young people today have no guarantees of the things that older generations did when it came to just, you could work at one company for your entire life and still probably buy a house and send your kids to college and just, have like a stable, life, and those lifelines don't exist for us anymore. So that's why people, and young people specifically, are fans of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and the policies they're putting out there, because they're promising something that doesn't feel high in the sky. It just feels like something that you need to live, to survive.
so that's interesting because I mean, there's definitely when you look at polling.
Yeah, those are things you see on TV, so freaking out about it.
But you see, like, that reflected in the polling. I mean, I was on Fox News last night, and they threw out the whole, he's not going to do well in Florida because of the Cubans, and, in Venezuela, let's just throw that in there as well, and like, every fear tactic they use. But when you look at the polling for your generation, it's just not it's not reflected the same way as the parents' generation. So, is it just because we're not getting the same news? I mean, I guess what I'm confused about is, why is the divide so big? I mean, I'm really surprised that you can come from a family that escaped oppression, or what they think is a form of oppression, and that's been messaged to you from the time you're a child, and yet you can come up and have a completely different. Are they just not buying that Bernie Sanders is like that? Is it an ideological difference? Meaning, okay, we know that a certain form of communism, I'm just using this as an example, is bad, but we don't think that that's Bernie. We just think that Bernie wants to make it wrong. Or is it they just don't buy it at all and they're ideologically completely different than their parents?
I think
Deep thoughts.
It's a good question. Deep thoughts with your deep thoughts. I think for the most part, I feel like it's different. Yeah, that's the way that I look at it. And I think if Bernie Sanders were to become president, America's not going to stop being a capitalist country. Our fundamental aspects of our economy and our political systems aren't going to change. But it's about having somebody in office who has different values, right? If those values line up with, at least with mine, right? About prioritizing things that actually help individuals and families rather than, just corporate welfare or putting endless money for the defense budget. That's kind of the way I look at it, and I think that a lot of young people probably do too. I don't think, just me projecting and guessing, but I think people vote and think in ways that are selfish, but I don't say selfish in a bad term. You think of what's in your own self-interest. And so, if it's more just about how this can affect me on a day-to-day basis rather than just how strong is my ideology, right, about some type of political system, I think that's probably more than me.
All right, let's talk a little bit about.
Am I making sense?
I agree. I agree. I think that
this is what we're seeing as we move forward is a generational shift, deeper understanding of what social issues mean and investing in social issues, and whether it's living for all or economic justice or racial justice. There's an interconnectedness that our generation is much more attuned to and is rebelling against the establishment of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Is there an update? I feel like
I can tell you about a couple things.
To us, David. Mansplaining.
There are other seats, other races out there that may be of interest to people. The Senate race in Alabama, Doug Jones is the incumbent Democrat. The Republican side, Jeff Sessions was trying to regain his Senate seat, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and he is now currently in second place in that race, behind a football coach named Tommy Tuberville.
Tommy Tuberville.
Yes.
Michael Brooks' next character.
Who really ran like unbelievably anti-Trump, saying basically down the line parroting Trump, and the other, that's about 75% of the voting. He's got about 1.5 point lead, and Roy Moore is way out of the money.
Wow.
So plutocrats and pedophiles. We draw the line somewhere in America. The other Senate race that's interesting right now is in Texas. This would be the race to go up against John Cornyn. And Chuck Schumer had a preferred candidate. That was a woman named N.J. Hagar, who lost a House race last cycle. She had about 4 times as much money as anybody else in the race. She now is sitting at about 25% of the vote. This was like a very crowded primary, about 12 or 13 Democrats in it. There's a woman named Christina Sunsom Ramirez, who is, she's a labor organizer. She is right now locked in a very close battle. About a quarter of the vote in. She's locked in a close battle with Royce West, who's a state senator out there from the Dallas area, I believe. So if Ramirez gets into the runoff, that could be a very, very interesting runoff, which would be in late May.
What's the percentage?
About a quarter of the vote. And then the last race, I don't know exactly. The last race, I do. I'm good to figure it out. The last race is very important. This is the 28th district of Texas. This is the race where Jessica Cisneros has been running a spirited race against Henry Cuellar, one of the worst Democrats in Congress. Right now, there's only about 20% of the vote in. It's officially too early to call. Nobody's been projected in this race. Right now, Cuellar has about a 4,000 vote lead. But again, this is very early in this race. Cisneros is definitely putting up a fight, and we'll see what happens as this develops. That's obviously a very important race. Justice Democrats, labor groups.
Everything came together basically.
A lot of people.
Except the Triple C and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, who came down and did a fundraiser for Cuellar, who was getting money from the Koch method.
Yeah, this is insane.
And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So this was a real battle for the soul of the party. And right now, it seems to be a real dog.
So that thing is like bonkers to me. That you have a Democratic Party that can say that they're anti-Trump and say that they have the electoral strategy to win, that they're taking money from the Koch brothers, who, starting in the late 70s, early 80s, invested across this country, saw a wave of changing demographics that were going to hurt Republicans, and they decided to redistrict, which hurt Democrats in the House. So this is mind-blowing.
And Cuellar strays in the party line all sorts of votes, goes to Republicans all the time, undermine the Democratic position on healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and the update of NAFTA. Cuellar's a bad guy. He actually, I wrote a story about how Cuellar sold his vote essentially on the law in his part of the country, which is the southern border in Texas, so he could get a river walk in Laredo. That's a prospect.org. You Google prospect.
He sold his wall.
He sold his vote.
Plus.
His vote. For a wall. There was no,
Got it, okay.
it was wall.
Not like he had a,
No, it
he's
was
like,
a wall
well, my
thing, though.
slice of the wall here,
There's
I'm
a
making
wall.
that to
You need a
There's
river
a
walk
wall.
like a mall.
Yeah, he wanted a river walk by the border in Laredo. And he said, if I get this, I'll vote for you to get you that wall.
Trying to revitalize the No, but you know, it's the dirty secret that is not becoming increasingly obvious with just what's been happening so far with, of course, Joe Biden and the establishment, everyone coalescing around them, is that Democrats honestly don't care that much. You know, the truth is that when it comes to at least the kind of mainstream establishment political players, it's like, you know, Republicans in name only, Democrats in name only, they still support the status quo because that's what employs all these people, that's what keeps everything ticking, and
Which is ridiculous, because, you know, you're sitting here, you've worked in the media, you know that's the game. You know that that's what's been playing against you, for instance. And they point to a place like oligarch Russia, like, oh, they're them. We're doing the same thing here. Right? We're the Koch brothers.
yeah, no, 100%, but again, you can't say we're oligarch on TV. And obviously there are differences, you know, between what's happening in Russia and between what's happening in the United States. You have to be able to speak honestly and openly about what's happening in your own country. You at all care about trying to change it, about it being, you know, a political system that works more effectively, more efficiently for people and actually represents them. And I don't know if it's that, you know, no one likes to do self-critique, at least on a political level here. We've all been, you know, kind of raised with the American exceptionalism idea that if we do it, then it's not wrong, or if it's happening here, then there's something not wrong about it. And in the media, I think I actually said this on Michael's show kind of just the other week too. Everyone is pretty different. We don't see a lot of really left talking heads, and so there's kind of just this like moderate bubble that is the status quo that really controls the narrative on a lot of ways.
And it's because they're making money off of keeping everyone alive. Like, let's just be real. They're not having any of us on because we're not making money from the advertisers. You know, we don't work for consulting firms that represent the pharmaceutical industry or the insurance companies or weapons manufacturers. We're just like, you know.
Well, because Comcast also doesn't own you, right?
All right.
That's the other thing. I mean, with all the media consolidation, the massive corporate ownership that we're seeing of media, that it's not so surprising, right? And who are the voices who are elevated? And ultimately, they also, at the end of the day, they see it as entertainment. And ratings. And, you know, I can't disclose who, but I was like DMing with somebody who's a cable news host the other day who had a really great smart show. It got canceled, and apparently the critique that he was hearing a lot was that it was too smart. Too smart. Too smart is what they were telling him internally. Like, you know, this just isn't really polling great with audiences right now. We think we're going to cancel it. It's too smart.
Yeah. Speaking of somebody too smart who somehow squeaked through cable news, Francesca Fiorentini. You may have seen Francesca's recent special on MSNBC highlighting Medicare for All and the importance of it. I don't know how they let her do this, so I'm going to ask her.
A complete fluke, but amazing that happened.
And
right?
she's entertaining and funny.
Yeah,
Francesca,
so rare they allow it.
come out and take the applause. Live streamers.
What's up, live streamers? We just fucking gave Bernie Sanders a win in California. You're live, you guys. I hope you've been smoking a fat J outside. Yes. California has legal weed, like we have when President Sanders is in office. woman's like, I think she's actually on a lot of stuff. What's going on? What's up, you guys? You guys knock doors? I'm so glad and thankful, and the wonk portion is over. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
We'll weave in every once in a
I'm
while.
told I have one more.
yeah, we've got one more stat, and that's
This is a good stat. You're like a stat. So the exit poll in California has come out, so now we can say this. In 11 of the 12 states with exit polls that voted tonight, a majority of primary voters supported replacing all private health insurance with a single payer. The one state that did not was Alabama, where it was a plurality, 49-45. The idea of primary being on now this time is actually.
So Francesca, you somehow got Medicare for All onto corporate media as insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies were advertising in places like Alabama. How the hell did you do that?
I mean, they just went with credential ads. That's just all they did. They were like, all right, car insurance. We're going with car insurance during this segment.
Different insurance.
Yeah, no, but it was good. Listen, I think I'm a big advocate of infiltrating mainstream avenues. I think we can't give up on the mainstream. I think it's our job to create the movements and create the demand for better programming. Because listen, we are all going to age into the cable news demographic very soon. And some of us are going to be able to afford it. And, they'll need us for to sell their packages and their streaming outlets. So I don't think it's all a wash. But yeah, it was a little bit of a minor miracle. Still waiting on hearing about new episodes. Thank you for anyone who's seen it. And if you haven't, I don't know the public there. Might have been one on it. But yeah, no, and it's important. I think it's interesting. We have people scratching their heads about why is Medicare for All so popular? Why do people want a national health care program? And then we don't actually talk to people, right? You just hear the horse race constantly. And when you talk to people, you're like, your infant needed intensive care for 24 hours, and that's why you're dead. Just the most simple, the most relatable, we all have good stories. So I think, I come from the internet, and as long as, we're doing that reporting somewhere, I think it will make its way to the mainstream.
Now let's talk about your the special that you did, because you went across America, you went to different places, you talked about Medicare for All, dispelled a lot of myths. What were some of your biggest surprises when you went out to the heartland?
I think one thing, if you saw it, Republican voters don't want cuts to Medicare or Medicaid. Medicare is not a censored word, my microphone just cut out. I talked to folks in Texas. Texas has like 54. If Texas goes Bernie, which is looking good, right, David? Give us good news.
I'm sorry, I was I was checking out your special.
No one's retweeting whatever you're tweeting.
We'll see. It's neck and neck, but the Democrats will be good.
But there are 54 million uninsured, that's a lot of people. 4 million uninsured people in Texas. It's like one of the highest levels of uninsured populations in the country. And so it makes sense that Bernie Sanders' message would resonate. So some folks I spoke to were like, yeah, my wife would be dead if we hadn't aged into Medicare. We turned 65 and it saved our lives. Absolutely Trump voters. Absolutely. And and I was like, well, what do you think about cuts to Medicaid and Medicare specifically? And they were like, no, we're not for it. I'm like, well, do you know the Republican Party has consistently put Medicare on the chopping block? And the gentleman's response was, well, that's what we have to pay for all the illegals, right? And I was like, all right.
Whoa.
Let's just imagine that immigrants weren't the problem. Would you still be in favor of cuts to Medicare? And he was like, no, of course not. Yeah. And then, actually, this is interesting, a little bit more prying, this family took in an undocumented undocumented immigrant and actually who lived with them for months. And then we're like, oh yeah, but not Jose. And it's like, everyone has, I mean, when you humanize people, which I think we're bad at doing, I think media is bad at doing it, I think generally we're all bad at humanizing one another, and you scratch the surface and you realize, and not to be super corny about it, but there's more that unites us, and we have a lot more humanity than I think we think we do. You know.
So this is mainly just messaging they're getting from, Fox News. Seriously, I mean, if they're Trump supporters, they're bringing an immigrant. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me that there can be such a disconnect. And clearly they believe this. It's coming from somewhere. It's not coming locally. It's coming from somewhere. I mean, did they share that with you that they believe what?
I mean,
Hannity's
clearly
telling
it
them?
was like, I'm spitting out a talking point, illegals, but then my actual lived experience is completely the opposite. I've never felt threatened by an undocumented immigrant. I've actually been friends with an undocumented immigrant at home. So yeah, you can absolutely see that disconnect right there.
But do you find too, like, I feel like people hear these one-off stories all the time,
Yeah.
and then that just completely
Anecdotal.
their view. Yeah, these
Totally.
anecdotes of like, well, Fox News showed me that this one illegal killed this one person, blah, 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 and so then you just kind of like broad sweep paint an entire segment of the population that way because of one anecdote.
For sure. I mean, but that's the thing is like, you have CNN, they've got their Trump supporters. I think they keep them in like a closet, and they just kind of like feed them snacks and like the little like, water, like the little bunny feeder water thing that they just kind of like trickle down and like feed them. And then they wheel them out every time they need Trump voters. And they're like, oh yeah, we're making America great again. Can I have some more snacks? Like, it's amazing. Like, I don't know where the mainstream media finds these voters, but they never scratch the surface. They're just like, well, we're here to wheel them out to show you, to scare everyone, essentially, and scare Democrats into voting for people like Biden. We're not here to actually scratch the surface. We're not here to push back. We're not here to challenge these voters. We're just here to, have them tell us that the moon landing was faked and QAnon is real, and, we're not going to question that. So that's also a problem.
I mean, I think these narratives work until the moment that, and not to bring it down, the moment that people start dying of a respiratory illness, and then you can make,
Disgusting.
and you can make,
What are you talking about?
I don't know, but I'm not shaking your hand.
I've been touching my face this whole time. That's
That's
because
your
you're
honor.
Why is that? If it's on my hand already, isn't that the problem? Anyways, what the argument that has to be made is that progressive ideas are the antidote to rapid spread of this potential pandemic. Paid sick leave is a major way to impede the spread of this virus. A universal healthcare system so that somebody who goes in and does the right thing and tries to get themselves tested isn't charged $3,200, as happened in Miami, for the test, is something that can stop the spread of this virus.
Yeah.
And this isn't a theoretical debate that we're having. This is real. This is how we're going to stop a real tragedy from coming upon our shores, and the way to do it is through progressive healthcare policy.
Yes.
It's specific. That's true.
I just want to say that.
example.
Yeah, I mean, I love how coronavirus has just come about now. Like, we're like maybe gonna fumble
With the Russians.
Yeah, for sure with the Russians. But like, we're maybe gonna fumble this election and give it to Trump again. And like, Corona's like, I will wipe you the fuck off the earth. Like, I'm waiting in the wings, and humanity's like, okay, give us just a few more months, all right? We're gonna get Texas. And Corona's like, you better hurry the fuck up. You're dead. You're done. I don't know why Corona also sounds like Trump.
There's an actual locust plague in Africa, so the 10 plagues are coming to stop this guy. But,
Yeah, they're like, you're killing the planet, we're gonna kill you, we're gonna detente, and we're just like, we're buying time.
But super
and the
delegates are
government's
gonna
gonna be
say
like, I'm
this.
just not sure which candidate you're gonna pass.
Speaking of the plague, Michael Brooks. Here is my dear friend Michael Brooks. He's
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, you have your own life. How lucky are you? We fixed Ag then. So Michael,
Yes.
you know, you've been looking at the results.
Nomiki.
Thank you. You got Chris Matthews off air with your impression. He stopped showing up to work one day and he showed up on set, you know.
That was he just like dressed up and like did like a honey trap thing and just like put on a wig and he was like, you look great, and then you know, if I were 20 years younger.
That's exactly what happened.
No, but for real, I mean, he's off air, and that's a win, right? Well, we'll get back to coronavirus in a second because I think that's a big theme of this election.
Matthews and coronavirus.
We're
It'll get back to us.
Well, Lona already explained what happened with Matthews. He was too intellectual.
That was not the case.
It was trivial. All politics is
was
local.
too much intellectual content.
No, but for real, I mean, that is a win
You're
for us.
Russian intellectuals. All right.
No, that's a win for us, though. When you get one person, Jason Johnson, who was smearing in just disgusting commentary about African American women surrogates of Bernie Sanders' campaign, he's suspended, which basically means he's never going back on air. And then the same week, Chris Matthews is suspended. That's a win.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a win if they give me his show. Look,
It should be like a progressive Hunger Games. They'll make all the progressive pundits, Michael versus me, and
you
we'll-
can have, actually, you know what? I prefer being where I am, I think, if it's going to be that stressful. So I say,
Oh, now you don't
just
want it?
go
Just
for
like
hardball.
challenge you to the Hunger Games? Like, I don't even want it. Or I'm good with an arrow, all right?
No, I'm good. No, I mean, here's the thing though, is like, I think that it could be a win if it's leveraged right. Like, I'm generally like, I'm not interested in like the firing games in general. That's like just not an area.
You don't like it when people are canceled?
Particularly, I have a, well, you know, I have a critique of that whole culture, but I think like more broadly, I think that this is what concerns me. Like, I'm gonna just loop this to Warren. Like, I think that
Get ready to see.
well, look, well, she's, you know, she's not gonna, she's like, we're now like in televangelist territory. It's just like, more campaigns left, and we need a donation. But they're like, no, but it's, there's this thing with the left in this country where it's like, it is both not nearly ruthless and cruel enough, and also like, petty and repulsive at the same time. So it's all like, oh yeah, like we're gonna cancel you and I don't like that and fuck that and blah 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 blah. And then like, oh no, Warren, we should be nice to her. They're not really running against each other. Like that's delusional. They're running against each other. It's a conflict, it's a competition. And my beef with Warren was never that she was running. My beef was this like ludicrous narrative that it wasn't a conflict, that they were like on the same bobsled team or something. Like that people don't take power and conflict seriously. And the stakes are really, I mean,
So you're saying
David Dane has so nicely explained to us that in addition to everything else, we're all gonna get corona in a second. And the stakes are very,
You made it
very
quicker, you were just in the plane, right?
yeah, and I shook your hand as
I
soon as I
gotta
got
go.
in here. Yeah. I said, David, it is so good to meet you, man. So good to see you. But
We're 6 feet away from each other.
alright, so I think like, when I think of, I mean, first of all, let's be clear, he won California, like, this is gonna still go on, and it's gonna be a long slog. But I think that I wish that there was much more clarity of purpose out of the gate, specifically with things like Warren. I wanna see a left that's a lot more savvy and a lot more power-oriented.
But so, if you don't organize that left, it just all becomes din on the internet, and it tends to be super petty. So what are you saying specifically? That the Bernie campaign should have hit back on more specific policy issues?
The Bernie
What do you
campaign
think?
should have leaked this professor that worked with Warren that came out in the last couple of days talking about her being a Reaganite. Their welcome to her in the race should have been there. And I think the thing that like, what catches me with like pettiness online is that one, it is a really exaggerated conversation in general, but I think, look, if we all want to sit down and have a conversation about how these media platforms are incentivizing us to all be, horrible at some level, that's probably a very worthwhile conversation to have in the sport, but that is a systems issue. That's not about one campaign or one movement or one type of politics. That's a big picture question about how we're communicating with each other. That's fine. But part of the reason, but also the other reason that people who advocate on behalf of Bernie are aggressive is one, because everything's stacked against him, obviously, but also because the campaign wasn't doing it.
That's
you
right.
literally had a
Real talk, guys. Let's go there.
Look, in terms of reality, why is it that, and then there's all these other weird incentives, again, all of this bizarre, neurotic conversation that they're on the same side and all this nonsense. So people have this social pressure, but it was just the very basic job of a campaign, which is we're going to differentiate, we're going to build a narrative, and we're going to be very clear about why we're running and this other person, we should get the vote. It's not very complicated.
But I don't think it's crazy, I'm sorry, to think that, okay, fine, you have two candidates who you assume have at least a similar worldview, and you don't want to alienate. I know you don't.
Well,
I do.
I mean,
You don't want to alienate and turn off their followers because you do hope that people can eventually unite and coalesce.
But the way you do that is by look, nobody should go and knock on somebody's door and act like you act on Twitter, okay? Nobody's talking about
I mean, I would act that way if it's near a cannon store. Come on, if you knocked on your cannon store, would you not be like, snake?
I would be like, this is you right now, or some other horrible Twitter discourse.
Bottle of wine.
But there's some conflation between kind of collegiality between people or social relationships and just the obvious basic function of the campaign, which is drawing distinctions.
If you want to go under the hood, Michael, about a dozen.
The hood?
Yes.
Under the hood.
Under the hood.
Oh, what are you
I have to
saying?
help you out here.
Where are we going?
I'm talking about a car metaphor.
Are you coughing?
About a dozen not staffers, but outside advisors who wrote plans for both the Warren and Sanders campaigns are the same people.
So?
I'm just telling you.
But Nancy
when it's
Pelosi
about
agrees with.
collegiality, there's a reason.
And they're both
why.
Bloods and Crips, very strange, they came together to write the policy. Very
That was where David wanted to go.
Ford and GM.
No, but they're not. And again, this is really why, and I think this is where there's just.
I'm just telling you.
When it comes to Medicare, accept the facts, Michael.
I don't accept the facts. I'm not a facts guy. I'm a let's look at reality.
No, but for all the
and picture
conversation
that.
about movement building, you seem to want more debate.
First of all, let's also include the vast majority of influence that the president has, which is foreign policy, which no Warren people give a fuck about. And every time we hear the same tired, ridiculous narrative, it ignores the thing that they have the most power in out of the gate. And secondly, that is a fact. But in addition to that,
Plenty of domestic power.
sorry.
Prospect of day one agenda. Plenty of power in the domestic arena to get things done.
Sure. And Bernie.
We're not paying enough attention to
area.
I mean,
People don't
right,
pray.
that isn't.
Well, wait, I think one point here that we just hit, speaking of coronavirus, the first indicator to me was, how could you reverse your position on Medicare for all? And now that Bernie Sanders is the only candidate in this race, or really that was ever in this race, for real, that believes in Medicare for all, and we are facing this impending epidemic, possibly, where farmers, if you're an oligarch, that you're not going to be protected.
Well, and this is also though where again, and I don't, and actually sincerely, David, I read you, I learn a lot from you, so I appreciate it, but it's it isn't, if you have two candidates that are suggesting they're the same thing because they have certain boxes. I mean, this is like doing voting off of a voter survey. Okay, two people sit down, I agree with this, I agree with that. Okay, sure, maybe. Then we have to look at, okay, what's somebody's decade-long commitment to something? what's somebody's theory of change, what's somebody's voting record, what's somebody's comprehensiveness, not of plans, anybody can write a blog post, but a theory of how it is done, and also comprehensiveness. And that's always been Bernie, including, by the way, even with single payer. I remember very early on seeing very clear signs like, that isn't a durable position. And people getting like, again, you can disagree all you want. I think it's pretty obvious how that's turned out. But getting like triggered that I would just say, I don't think this should really.
I guess, Michael, what I hear you saying is like, if we had only had the correct line on Warren, we could have avoided where we are now. And I guess I just disagree with that. I've seen Warren as making an incredible case for the progressive movement in every single debate, save the debate after her heel turn, okay? So for me, there's a Warren before and there's a Warren after. I think Warren says things in ways Bernie has not said. She attacks in ways Bernie has not attacked. She was an ally, and I still consider her supporters gettable allies that we will need. Whoever the fuck is running her campaign, I don't consider people running, but I
Thanks, Joe Rosebars.
I'm not talking about her. Again,
but
let's
you have to
really
think about it in
distinguish.
more broadly. Like,
No, I mean, I'm
that's why
giving
I'm
it
asking
like.
who should have had what line on her when.
No, because
me
it's a
tweeting
bigger.
about it a year ago
It's-
on
well,
how I thought Warren was ultimately going to pan out to be a moderate candidate, that would have done nothing. So.
Well, actually, it would have done something if everybody did that and they were strategic, and then there might have
But
been.
then you'd still be Bernie.
Earlier.
I mean, the response is Bernie bros.
We don't
And
need
then-
more purity
I
tests on the
don't-
left.
It's not a question of purity test.
It
It's a
is, it's
question
supposed to
of.
be purity test.
Okay, so then,
But you gotta
so
find
the
the
countervailing example. So then, let's go. Let's not draw distinctions. Let's not have a campaign. Let's pretend that everything's the same.
But that's a
And let's
Nomiki
go.
thing.
But that's what it is.
It-
Because this is the same. I mean, honestly, I'm genuinely shocked that we're still getting this spin, like, right now. I mean, and it's what's amazing to me is that if
What
you go,
spin?
that they're somehow not overlapping or helpful or not in conflict. If you look like Obama people tonight, online, Republican analysts, like anybody that can look at this with like any clarity, doesn't have like an attachment to Warren being the thing she's not, or this being a successful experiment in a campaign not attacking another campaign, which it is not. They're all saying like, that's interesting, that like, this is objectively not helping Sanders, it's objectively not helping the progressive agenda. So literally all I'm
Now
saying.
we know, yes.
So,
Okay,
I mean, I do think.
three things.
Yeah.
Number one, you don't read me because it was all the way back in October.
I love this though. Wow. You will not get suspended. You will not get suspended.
I read David's pieces on the Crips
It was
and
October
Bloods
2018.
explaining the Warren race.
Because you didn't hear the word on it. It was October 2018 that I wrote about the difference between Warren and Sanders.
Right.
It was very clear and obvious from their servicing power. Number two, finding the
So what was
stage.
the difference?
Finding
What was the difference then?
Their entire theory of change. One wants to overhaul
Right, and what about the
society, the other one wants to reform it and make it
Right. And then to think about other
Happy capital.
foreign policy,
Capitalism.
military.
We're gonna rename capitalism.
Number two, finding the state here on Super Tuesday where you put Warren and Sanders votes together and it beats Joe Biden.
Well, that's at this point, but there's a different factor here, and I understand that if you're looking at it through data, and even if you're looking at it through momentum, but what she is essentially acting as right now, from my opinion, is she is there, not from my opinion, from her campaign manager's opinion, she is there to hurt Bernie Sanders, because as they also said, their only path to victory, as was Joe Biden's before today, was just to be at the Broadening convention, not through an electoral process.
No
So
question about it, and I wrote that today, in fact.
I didn't catch that word. I missed today's article.
With these numbers,
Which is a good thing to say.
she does not last the week. There
Yes,
is not
and
going
she's
to.
hurt Bernie Sanders.
With these numbers, she will not last the week. It will not, going forward, be a situation where she is in the position that.
What?
Because
She's the black box of candidates, you guys. Like
every
predicting
campaign
what she's
says,
going to do.
every campaign says we're going to go on We're gonna move in
Okay, all right.
until the day they.
But not every single campaign says.
Buttigieg
and
just
not
had
every-
an event scheduled the
Buttigieg
day that he went
was-
to South Bend.
Buttigieg
We had a phone call
actually
for Biden.
performed well. Not every, I have never seen a campaign, and David
not-
might, David
I
might
will-
have, David, you might have.
I will be happy to bet you that she does not last a
I
week.
don't know.
Wait.
I don't
This is
know.
what's crazy, is you actually agree.
Whoever loses has to go into the hood, actually, and knock doors for Biden. Oh, no malarkey, no malarkey.
There's a lot.
You know we're all gonna have to go
Yeah,
in the
right.
hood and knock doors for Biden, you guys, right? If this thing goes bad.
All right,
Don't
let's
think
put a
by
pause.
telling Warren supporters that they're so
I-
different, you're doing Bernie Sanders any favor.
Wait. Let's put a pause on this. We'll continue the Warren conversation all night long. Make a little room on the couch. I know you're Chelsea, you have to head out in a few minutes, so feel free to signal when TYT is stealing you from us. We have a new political pundit to the scene who kind of is famous for other things. We're just all famous for talking. You're famous for being a pro. Justin Jackson, LA Charger running back. He has been an incredible advocate on Twitter and beyond. Justin, you were on our first show, and I just want to thank you for that. But you blew me away. I just want to pause for a second on the Warren conversation, because this is going to come up repeatedly, we know. You blew us away with your near-tangent annihilation, and we have now entered the
I don't think you should criticize your tangent.
Hang on.
And you should not have to.
Stop.
We have now entered the near-tangent portion of the
Think
debate.
about people who might read her Twitter feed.
So, Neera Tanden, for those of you who don't know, which is crazy because you're here, she's the president or whatever of the Center for American Progress. And, you know, we've been in battle, I've personally been in battle with her in the room, whether it was platform video or beyond. And you just wrecked her on Twitter. And then got pressed because of it. Because, you know, you're known for other things. So how did you decide to zero in on this bad actor?
I had her in my sights for a long time. I was busy. Obviously our season ended. So it actually was like a perfect storm where our season had just ended, and she said something. I mean, she said stupid shit all the time. So she said something stupid, and I was just like, I'm just gonna dunk on her. Like, it's so hard. Like, all I wanted to do was bring up how she was, and I wanted to do it in a way it was like completely factual, right? So I just brought up the WikiLeaks stuff, which, I mean, she hates to talk about, right? She hates when you bring up, you know, the Libya emails and stuff, anything with WikiLeaks, so she hates that. So, you know, I kind of just hit her where it hurt, and then I got blocked.
You got blocked by her?
Really, so it's kind of like a random pass.
It really is. She likes to toy. She tweeted at me, I think like 2 days ago or something. I don't know what I said about her. I can't, honestly, who cares? But it was very funny because she said, well, she wouldn't know because she blocked me. And it's like, first off, she blocked me. But this is like a real thing. This is a woman who runs how many, $300 million this organization has from who knows what countries, funding this institution, supposedly pushing for progress. She had a summit a couple of years ago where all of the presidential candidates in the Democratic race, with the exception to Tulsi Gabbard and Marianne Williamson, who are out, or she's out, and Bernie Sanders. Me too. But they all showed up at the CAP conference at the Four Seasons and paid thousands of dollars for their tickets. So I just find it amazing that this woman has so much power over the presidential campaign, yet is blocking people all day on Twitter.
That's so much time to tweet.
Okay. Maybe there's something else.
I think she is everything that needs to be. She's kind of been behind the scenes working everything, right? She never like ran for office or anything, but she's always running next to Hillary Clinton, and she's saying all that shit on stage back in the 90s and everything. Like, you see Neera Tanden right there, right? And so even after Hillary has kind of gone to the woods and tried to come back, Near still.
She came back today.
Right, yeah, I saw that, right? Just to shit on Bernie, of course. But Near is right there, right? So it's almost like she's behind the scenes putting the things as well. So she's really the epitome of the Democratic establishment that, you know, we're trying to keep.
I just want to say Judge Judy made an appearance on DC. Oh, come on. Like, honestly, Judy over Chris Matthews. Like, that was a solid, like, whatever. No, I do have to go, but I just want to, I want to leave y'all and say that I think we all have to, you know, keep our heads up, and we know that no matter what happens, we're in this for the long haul, right? And that we know seriously, no matter what happens, it is about building movements, it is about adding pressure, it is about local elections, it's about all that, and I think we knew we couldn't rest on our laurels, we knew this wasn't necessarily going to be a blowout, but it looks like we won really, really big, we're still going to keep fighting, and I'm sorry that we might have to make Joe Biden trend on TikTok. Think of your dance for no malarkey, y'all, because we might have to do that as we also, you know, swallow our faces entirely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Nomiki.
teaching us about healthcare. Tell everybody at TYT we say hi. Speaking of TYT, do we have an update on Jake's election by any chance?
Let's check that out.
You work on that. Let's go back to
It's the special election between Jake Yeager and, well, there's a lot of people in there.
Chrissy
Smith is sort of the anointed candidate. There are no results just yet in that race. So I got nothing.
All right, well, let's go. We'll just...
I will say that Jeff Sessions and Tommy Tuberville have qualified for the runoff. Did you ever play Tuberville?
No, I know who it is.
Yeah, so he could be a U.S. Senator.
Justin should run for something, you know, maybe. I don't want to tell you what to do, but you got some work.
I kind of like being on the outside, just shit on. It's fun. But maybe one day.
So much more fun to shit on people, right?
You delete the Twitter feed the day before.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think
Seriously.
So
Justin, this is like, we talked about this on the show a bit, but I think what's so fascinating about surrogates and folks who are successful and out in the public who are on the left is that, you know, we in the media are sort of blacklisted. Yet you're out there able to speak your voice, to challenge New York Tangent in such an educated way. Are you feeling pushback, especially in the history of the NFL right now?
I haven't felt any. In fact, my agent keeps hitting me up, like people keep telling me, like, oh, let's see what Justin's doing. I get a lot of people that are just saying that they like how I'm speaking my mind and everything. And the way I go about it is I really don't try and disparage people too much. You know, as far as punching, like I never except for near. Punching up is fine, you know, punching up is completely fine. But I really try and bring facts to the table and yeah, I try and like advocate just for obviously the candidate that I want to win, but do it in a way that's like I said, never punching down.
How do you feel about Joe Biden right now?
Oh man, it's
Don't be divisive.
I mean, you can. I think there's no clear encapsulation of the fact that the Democratic Party elite and establishment would rather lose with someone like Joe Biden than with Bernie. And I think that's. I mean, you see it in sentences. He just mistaked his wife and his sister today.
Wait, you did
That was
that.
at the campaign stage, yeah. He mistaked his wife for his sister, and he forgot what immigration reform was.
Yeah.
And he also said, let's take a look in the hood, Jack. Yeah, he said, come on, Jack, let's take a look in the hood. So, I mean, I guess, look, as somebody who covers these horrible, depressing debates, the idea of having a debate at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon that wraps up in 45 minutes is appealing. They can put the questions at the bottom of Jell-O cups for both of them.
Oh man, well they can't use ages if they get us Bernie anymore, that's for sure.
But they will.
This is true.
like the thing is, like, it's like just absorb that, like, I mean, could you imagine? And I am happy to be like indignant Bernie bro. If Bernie Sanders, let's just imagine two things. One, Bernie was walking around for 30 years being like, I'm Chinese. No problem. Or if two, he was just like, I left Burlington and I was arrested on my way to see Elsie Ventura.
Corn pop.
And one of the things did everybody watch Donald Trump's Super Bowl ad? Did anybody catch that? Was about the
Wait,
woman-
Justin did, obviously. What'd you think, Justin?
I mean, I think he goes against Biden, he's gonna run something like that.
That's what I'm
Wait,
saying.
He
yeah.
can get to the
For those
level
that didn't
Biden,
see
he
it.
can't get to
Exactly.
Right.
He focused on a woman who he pardoned in Alabama, thanks to the work, and I mean this like totally sincerely, like all credit to Kim Kardashian, she saved this woman's life, 100%. And the ad, by Trump standards, is relatively, like, I would say it's narcissistic instead of like, you know, his face is not an ad. And it's a woman reuniting with her family, and it's very interesting because there's a lot of language about families reuniting, which to me is definitely counter-programming to kidnapping children. And what you're doing when you do an ad like that is two things. One is he's doing, believe it or not, it still exists. It was almost reminding me of like a George W. Bush compassionate conservative.
Right.
You're giving permission to white voters that dig him but feel a little uncomfortable by how overtly racist it is, and against a Biden or a Bloomberg specifically. Obviously, it's not going to be Bloomberg, but Biden, you know, could very well be. Donald Trump can run a, you know, fake, but he's supported that bill in the Senate. He pardoned this woman. He will shamelessly run against Joe Biden to the left where it serves him. And if he flips or keeps home 2% of the African American vote, done. And I'm like, you know, we'll see. I mean, obviously Biden's performing very well right now, but it's a very, very small scenario.
That's what people don't realize. The Democratic
yes.
Party in the primary is a controlled scenario. And in states that are lined up in a certain way, whether intentionally or not, to favor Joe Biden or the establishment, historically, that's going to benefit Joe Biden. In closed primary states, it's going to favor Joe Biden. In states where you don't have, I mean, newer voters, newer rules.
I think the thing that we, as a movement, even Michael, do have to reckon with,
I love this new numbers.
do have to reckon with,
No
is
Marky David.
the theory of this race, from the Sanders campaign's perspective. They're going to find all these new voters, they're going to bring them to the polls, and they're going to swarm the electorate and transform the electorate. And it's not happening. You know, to the extent that there has been high turnout in these races, it's been from the suburbs, it's been from Biden supporters, it's been from the kinds of turnout that we saw in 2018 in, you know, the moderate Republicans decided, oh, I just want to go out brunch again, and you know, I'm going to support the Democratic nominee. That's a problem that needs to be solved, and it can't just be solved by having one progressive plan. It needs to be solved by why isn't this message, which we know is popular, we gave the Medicare for All numbers, why isn't this message actually turning out people who are disinclined to vote out?
Well, I agree with the obvious point. Obviously there should have been consolidated lane. I don't know. I don't even understand how we're still arguing that one. But I mean, I've said from the beginning, of course, no, he's not turning out new people. And I think, unfortunately, I think that this talking point, like, they have made that argument, and I've heard more sophisticated versions of it, which is like setting reasonable expectations, like maybe a few percentage points, maybe some extra people. In the doldrums in the fall, they were talking about, like, he's in third place in the polls, but he's going to win because there's going to be this massive wave of unregistered people. And not only is that not going to happen, I think the real core contradiction, very specifically hard thing for Sanders and any type of actual left presence is that I think the level of disillusionment that is set in amongst a lot of the electorate, totally justifiably, is only going to get overturned by actually delivering.
Well, and here's the risk with Biden.
Of the strategy.
But here's the risk with Biden.
I would say it's like really.
It's not in cities, and I mean,
It's
in
not-
cities, you said?
in cities, and we're seeing progressives
Yes.
take cities all over this country.
Well, on a local level.
At the local level,
In off
that
years.
yes.
When the
that-
Democratic Party is not organizing, because let's not forget the Democratic Party only organizes in presidential years when they've got to fight to keep their contracts.
But
in
I
terms
just
to an
come
extent,
back,
but-
I think, to kind of what I was saying before about the messaging too, is that, yes, obviously polling will show you that when it comes to healthcare and education, all of the policies that someone like Bernie is proposing are popular, but the anti-messaging there of how scary a socialist, democratic socialist type of president would be, I think is just more potent. It's more powerful for, for the more moderate, for the suburban voters who are Democrats who don't like Trump and are so disgusted with Trump, but they still find this other type of Bernie Sanders kind of candidate.
Okay, we're gonna go to a quick break in a second, but and we're gonna shift things around on the sec here, but I just want to end with the point that I think is spot on here. And what you're saying, Michael, in that the Democratic establishment, every single time they try to knock down the movement, they're playing a psychological torture, right? This is a game of psychological torture. You keep losing, you're gonna lose your incentive to turn out, to organize, to knock on doors, to get $27 donations. But at the end of the day, this again is a controlled scenario where every state, and shout out to Michael Kapp in the audience here, who's a DNC member here in California, because he's organizing, he's still here. He's organizing to reform the Democratic Party in California, which is one of the better parties and still has major issues. So they're using the mechanics of the party to disenfranchise the voters that we want to bring into the tent.
And when you talk, just 20 seconds, when you talk to those folks who might fit into those parameters anecdotally, it's not like the problem is the people who are freaked out by socialism are the people who actually vote. And the people who are not voting are not scared of those words, they're not opposed to the agenda, they are totally like, sounds good, why would I disrupt my day to vote? It's fucked.
Well,
And that is something, again, that needs to be overcome by some way of delivery, and that is the catch-22.
Well,
Not to mention we vote on a Tuesday, on a work day.
Well, we know all of those.
And the fact that there are people right now in this city who have been in line for 3 hours. This was a predictable clusterfuck. Can I say clusterfuck?
You can say that. I'm not.
This was a predictable
Are you
clusterfuck.
rules yet?
They changed the entire voting system in Los Angeles County for a very high-profile, important election, and had this major public education challenge of telling 10 million people that your precinct isn't going to be where your precinct is and has been for 30 and 40 years. We're going to move to these voting centers that are only 1/5 as many as there were precincts traditionally throughout the county. And this is the predictable result. We have 3-hour lines right now. We have people still in lines. The Sanders campaign put out an injunction to extend voting by 2 hours so that these people could end up actually getting a vote. It's a horror show. And we knew this was going to happen. You can't change the whole thing and expect on your $15,000 budget and a couple bus signs that you're going to educate the entire electorate to how the voting system is completely changing. And yes, there is this is hubris. This is more incompetence, but there is a design that we know from the political consultancy world that you want to choose your voters. You want to narrow the universe of who votes, because then it's easier to identify those voters.
Just
And
distract people.
if that sounds like
People that are allowed
suppression,
to vote.
if
Yeah.
that sounds like suppression, it is.
Well, can I just say one last thing about that too, is why can't we just use paper? Like, I had this problem today, I don't know how many of you voted in LA today, and there was a very, very long line. It was moving very slowly at the voting center that I went to. But it's also because they had these new machines that I found confusing to use. There were a lot of elderly people there too that seemed very confused, were asking a million questions. And even the volunteer that I had spoken to kind of whispered in my ear was like, they're very finicky, so just be really careful.
The thing I heard is that
Really careful about what, deliberate about which button you push. If you mess up, it's all over. Like, they're problematic.
the thing I heard is that there's this thing. I vote by mail all the time, but and you should.
Yeah, shout out to Vote by Mail. Michael Wilson's sister.
That's like saying hello, LA. It's just such a shameless thing to say vote by mail usually. There was a thing where you would get a printout after you did the whole vote. You got a printout,
I thought I
and
got
then
to
you
take
had
it home.
and you had to feed it back into the machine. Apparently, the big issue was jamming of the paper. That was causing the line.
That was the issue in New York just a few months ago.
ridiculous.
It rained the day that we had to vote, and the paper that was going into the machine was getting wet because people had jackets. I mean, you guys don't know what jackets are here in Los Angeles. It's rainy and cold, but it was getting the paper wet and it was jamming up the machines. And
I was in front of them. I was just like, don't even vote. Just don't worry about it.
that was my
I thought the printout was mine to take
I was
home,
like,
and I was
okay.
walking away, and the volunteer was like, no! I started sprinting over to me.
And then there was a thing where you had to put the thing in and then hit a button, so you took a left before you fed the.
All right, but guys,
Okay, guys.
we're still here. We can still win.
Justin, this is like battle of the pundits.
Bernie
You gotta be
Sanders
like,
won California. Come
He's
on,
the-
let's
Michael's the quarterback of the team.
go.
You gotta really get it. Michael, shut up for a minute. Let Justin
Well, Justin, no, it's okay. We can end it on a good note. I'm not gonna lie. I was gonna bring up a last point.
Go ahead.
I'm
Wait, we're coming back in like 5 minutes. We're just taking a quick break, shuffling around. Do you want to wait? All right, cool. Guys, stick around if you're on live stream. We're just going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back. We got to move some chairs around and stretch and get another kombucha. So, go grab your wine, take your bartenders.
You're so smart, though.
Hey guys! We're coming back. We are back after our commercial break, sponsored by my kombucha. Is this my kombucha? Yeah. Are you my?
friend.
Are you my friend? Sponsored by Kyla or kombucha. All right, guys. We have some updates for you. Very exciting updates out of Texas, straight from David here.
Well,
David, what's happening?
I don't know how exciting it's going to be. I mean, the New York Times Needle is leaning towards Biden winning in Texas. We have he's up by about 2 percentage points with about 64% of the vote in. That's going to end up being kind of a wash in terms of delegates. It's going to be pretty even. In Maine, it looks like Biden's going to win that. He's up by about 1%.
How many delegates is Maine? Should we really
Very little.
care?
Very
I
little.
don't care about people from Maine, but
I do have
it's for vacationers, so it's not the summertime, and that is when Bernie people come out, right?
Sure enough. Interesting update on the 28th district in Texas for the Justice Cisneros race. She spoke tonight, said, this is closer than anybody thought. The race has not been called. Henry Cuellar said he would not speak tonight. So right now, there's only 28% of the vote in. Cuellar's leading by about 4,000 votes. It's like a 54-45 situation. But the fact that he's not coming out to speak suggests that they know a little bit more, and they know that this is going to be a razor-tight race. Yeah.
Let's talk.
In LA County.
That's what I was going to. Is LA? That's okay.
In LA County, Measure R. People vote for Measure R.
What is Measure R for those of you tuning in?
Measure R is an accountability measure for the LA County Sheriff's Department. A lot of reforms in there. That is going to win by a wide margin.
Very good. See, this is actually the bright side of presidential elections is that the Democratic Party and people organize in presidential elections. That's the bright side of it. The dark side is it doesn't often happen in off elections, and that's actually how progressives can out-organize the centrists and the status quo, is because if they organize, they're not able to defeat the machine that's often on the payroll for presidential cycles. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes. That's how, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was able to outmaneuver, I mean, that's the way I see it, the Queen's County machine. And that's how Squad got it and so many progressives in the off cycle.
The other race that, this probably isn't very good news, in the early vote at least, Jackie Lacey has a majority. She has about 55%. Jackie Lacey is the district attorney in LA County. She was criticized for not prosecuting, I think something like 500 different murders of young black men. Gascon, who is, and Rachel Rossi are kind of almost even in the early vote. They each have about 23% of the vote. But Lacey, I mean, we'll see if she stays above 50. This is just the early vote. This is none of the election day and provisional and later votes. So it's not in stone. Famously, you might have seen that Black Lives Matter appeared on the doorstep of Jackie Lacey and her husband pulled a gun on the group that was just trying to have a conversation with Jackie Lacey, of course, after homage. So anyway, we'll monitor that and continue to see what happens. But,
do we have any news on James' race here in California? the
All right,
ones
let's go back to the 25th, and I'm refreshing the Secretary of State's office, and here we go. And drum roll, please. Nothing yet.
No results in yet. That's interesting.
No results in. They have not listed even the early vote.
And for those not watching that are watching not from California, this is also a jungle primary. And can you explain a little bit about what a jungle primary is?
Right. So we have a top, not for the presidential, but for everything else, we have a top two primary. So when you go to the polls, you can vote for anybody, Democrat, Republican, no party preference, anybody on the ballot. No matter what your party is, you can vote for them. And then the top two of any party progress to the general election. It's very tough to defeat an incumbent in this manner because they typically get in the top two, and it makes it more difficult because it rewards at the end of the line, moderate candidates who can draw from both parties.
Is that like ranked choice voting, or how is it different?
No, it's not at all like ranked choice voting.
See how I place those
It's
questions?
the top two of any party they get in, and it's a bad reform. It hasn't really done even its stated goals. It hasn't achieved. It's supposed to achieve this great moderation of the electorate. It's done that in sort of individual ways, but not overall, because the system still rewards big money. It's a fact of life at this point, and candidates have to live with it.
Real quick before we go to our next guest, the delegate count right now. What is the update?
Right. So this is very preliminary, but according to the New York Times, you have Biden earning 188 delegates, Bernie earning 160 delegates, and then a trivial amount to everybody else. Tulsi Gabbard actually got one delegate in America alone.
Taking on Michael Bloomberg there, is she?
So we'll see what that means, because the previous rules on these debates was that if you had a delegate, you were in the debate. So we'll actually see what happens.
We'll get to this, but there's been an update on that.
Yeah.
Because we just like to change the rules as we go. Yeah. Okay, so our next guest. You guys ready? You may know him from all the left media. He is a host, he's a producer. He's the renaissance man of the left media, in my opinion. We're talking about Nando Diva. So dapper. Yeah, sure. It's just like Johnny Carson. I was like it. So Nando, last time I saw you, we were on TYT together.
I feel like I'm too tall for this couch.
Well, you sit in a chair if you want. First dibs.
How's it going?
Hey. All right, last time I saw you, it was on TYT. We were feeling great about Bernie. How you feeling right now?
You know what? The last 2 days have been incredibly clarifying in many ways. It's something that I kind of knew intellectually, but it's been terrifying to witness it happen in real time, which is just the raw, naked power of the ruling class coming together in the most efficient way imaginable to give a shot of adrenaline to this zombie campaign for Biden, which was it's like that scene in Pulp Fiction where they stab Uma Thurman in the heart with a shot of adrenaline. So what it did is kind of dispel the feelings that we had a couple weeks ago. Like when you booked the show, I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. Like it's gonna be.
But that was gonna be a celebration as of last night.
Yeah, it's gonna be an absolute coronation. We're gonna be, and they're never gonna make it easy. They're never gonna make it easy, right? We always knew that in our hearts on some level that they're just not gonna. The powerful don't give up their power.
I believe the quote is that power never concedes without a fight.
That's true. And so we should have seen this coming in a certain way. I think I talked myself into thinking that this dynamic was the exact same thing that happened in 2016 with the Republicans, in which they all kind of stared at each other and no one consolidated and Trump snatched it from under. But the thing is, Trump was not as meaningful a threat to the Republican Party the way Bernie Sanders is to the Democratic Party. And we've seen, like, Barack Obama working behind the scenes to prop up this zombie Joe Biden campaign. I mean, it really...
Hashtag zombie Joe Biden.
I mean, that's what it is. I mean, Joe Biden supported the Iraq War. Like in any sane society, that kind of person would be expelled from any nominally left of center party. Strong turn, the most racist. I don't think you can say that words in this. The racist motherfucker to like in the 20th century, like. Joe Biden, who's done the bidding of the credit card companies, as David Day could explain, or has explained millions of times in his articles. It's comical that he is the sort of standard bearer of the nominally left of center party in the United States. I mean, it's just so unfit for the moment in so many ways. But the ruling class, they have their tricks. They don't care. They really don't care. Like, they don't care about any of these things. Like, they don't care about any of these issues. They don't care about whether Joe Biden is going to implement any sort of agenda. Like, the only thing they care about is to protect their own status and power. So they don't even care if he loses to Trump.
No,
which he absolutely will.
That's my whole theory on this right now is you know, it's crazy to me that these people who say, well, ads, they determine the election. Well, Michael Bloomberg just bought basically every ad space anywhere, whether it's cable news or otherwise, and he hasn't been able to beat Biden. Biden really didn't have any money before South Carolina. This has been a facade of momentum, and it's worked to an extent because in the states that complement Biden, he's been able to turn it out and maximize it. But at the end of the day, they're going to have this man who has had maybe like 7 minutes of debate time each debate, and like 5.5 of them have been barely coherent. And he's going to be able to debate Donald Trump, who annihilated, you know, Ted Cruz is a pretty good debater. Say what you will about him, he's a very good debater.
He literally is like a national champion at debate. Ted Cruz has argued 9 Supreme Court cases and won 6 of them.
How did you know that? I like that.
Well,
Look
I
at
don't know, man. You know, I'm a professional at this. You know, so okay. So here's and tonight's sucked. Okay, tonight was terrible, awful, and terrifying in many ways because, like I said, we just saw the raw naked power fully masked off. But at the end of the day, we have to hold on to a bit of hope. And that is that I think that this is probably their best punch that they've thrown. And it landed, I'm not gonna lie, it landed, but it did not knock us out. It did not knock us out. He can't, you know, as soon as he starts campaigning, he'll say like, you know, like it used to not be racist when you told little black kids that, hey boy, shine my shoes. And it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, it's like, that's this campaign's all about, Jack. It's about, whatever, you know, like, and so he's gonna step on the rake, you know, like he's like a Looney Tune that just keeps on stepping on the rake every time. You know, he sees it right there, but he can't help himself. So that's how we have to cling to it. Bernie, and you know, Bernie's still got life in him, so we have to fight harder than ever now.
What I love about our movement is that we're full of fighters, and the last really good punch against Joe Biden, I think, came from our next guest.
Ooh.
I
Good
think
segue.
I thought it was perfect.
You are a professional at this too.
Sometimes. I'm drinking kombucha, not wine for a reason. Our next guest really crushed Joe Biden up until tonight. And I will give her almost all the credit for that one. We're talking about Lucy Flores. Lucy, could you come up to the front? We'll be right back. Lucy Flores! All good. Grand entrance. Let's get you away. So Lucy were running for office, and then you were a surrogate for Bernie in 2016.
Yes.
You ran for Congress,
Yes.
scared the establishment,
Yes.
and then you and I sat on this little thing called the Unity Reform Commission, where you were on the superdelegate committee. No, but I say that because people always ask me about the superdelegate process, and I've listened to people like you, but I wasn't on that committee. You were on that committee. You fought to eliminate superdelegates. So I just want to make sure everybody in this audience knows Lucy was there fighting very hard to eliminate these outdated superdelegates. So she deserves a round of applause for that. For
And look, at the end of the day, we didn't get entirely what we wanted, which is pretty indicative of, frankly, the process and government, et cetera. We ended up moving superdelegates over to the second round of nomination. And so ultimately, look, I think for me, what was instructive about that entire process is that, one, we did accomplish some change. And two, that change for the most part is slow. And I know, being a former elected official, I know how frustrating it is, and frankly, how crushing it is to have to kind of walk that line between process and change and staying in that fight when people are hurting every single day, right? And so, I think that more than anything moving forward with the results today is that we do have to continue to talk about how we have to stay committed to this, right? And that ultimately this is a long game, both now and in the future. And I know you want to give us some updates. So
She's such a professional. Look at her.
This delegate race is in fact a delegate race. So I would not, and look, I officially endorsed Elizabeth Warren. So Bernie is not by any means out of this at all, right? If anything, we have to move forward now in a way that begins to consolidate and to frankly listen and to learn, moving forward, because so much depends on it.
I wasn't going to give an update, but actually just build on what you're saying. I think it's clear from the numbers that Bernie Sanders has a lock on 25% of this Democratic electorate, and it's time to get from 25 to 50. And how do you do that? And some of it is you have to bring people into your movement that you might not agree with on every single thing. I don't, at least if you're going to do it this year, that's what's going to happen. You also need to broaden the base, as Bernie's been trying to do. And you need to create the choice, which hasn't really been part of this yet. Biden has skated through several months of this race. And now there's going to be a choice where, Bernie got 43% last time because he was going against Hillary Clinton. That was the choice, right? And now we have Biden as the choice, and it's a different scenario than when you have a fractured race. So those three things, do they get you to 50? We'll see.
Joe Biden lied about getting arrested in South Africa. To free Nelson Mandela, he was gonna escape from Alcatraz with Venezuela. You made me realize this old Marxist line, heightening the contradictions. Now is the time to heighten the contradictions. This is Joe Biden we're talking about, one of the most honored people in the universe.
Come on. Let's be realistic about this, okay? You said it, right? The shot in the heart.
Yeah.
Literally Biden is a walking zombie. He will not die. He will go away, right?
Well, especially now that he's an avatar
none of that.
for the anti-Bernie.
Right. Well, as of tonight.
We cannot continue to believe and to move forward with this idea that if we just keep pointing out his flaws, etc., that people are going to make logical decisions about it. People vote with their hearts. People vote with how they feel. People are literally undecided until that last moment. And so we have to, we see that, and so many people see these distinctions. But there's a reason why Biden is still leading as far as the wins, not in the delegate race and
it's still kind of close, but leading in all of these states, right? And I will say, one of the things that I don't think that you really talked about is the gains that Bernie has made within the Latino community. And when Bernie, ultimately, when all is said and done, et cetera, if he actually goes on to win this, or continue on the race with the delegates, et cetera, particularly when we think about the states that still have yet to come, Florida, Arizona, other delegate-rich states that have high Latino density populations. The gains that he made both in Nevada, where Bernie won more than 70% of the Latino vote there. In California, it's forecasted to be more than 55% of the vote. In Texas, it's forecasted to be over 45% of the vote. Whereas in 16, Bernie only got around 20% of the vote in Texas, right? So we're looking at gains of 20 plus points over the course of 4 years. And so we do have to constantly go back to this expansion and talking about how can we continue to bring people in and also sit with the fact that I don't know what Warren is going to do, but we also have to be respectful of the fact that you have a lot of women of color that were behind Warren, and they're in their feelings right now. And so how are we respectful about that and say, okay, there were two progressives, whether you wanted to say that there was distinction or not, et cetera, they are two progressives, and those supporters clearly want a progressive home. So how do we collectively work to bring these people in?
I'm going to praise you again. You were a big part of that. You, in 2016, with courage, and I want to reiterate this to folks who may not remember, 2016 was a lonely place.
I'll never forget.
It was a lonely place, and there were a lot of attacks, and a lot of people are still being attacked, and you not only stepped up against Hillary Clinton, then you stepped up against Joe Biden. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And as a result, the base did expand, and you were a key part of that Latino outreach. But also I want to reiterate that 2016 was a two-way race, arguably. This was like a 17-way race until yesterday, and he still doubled his numbers.
Right, exactly. Which frankly, that should be a case study for all candidates moving forward, and certainly for the Democratic Party, which we have been arguing for many, many years. And part of the reason why ultimately I became so disillusioned with my own party, and ultimately, became at odds so often with Harry Reid and other leadership in the state of Nevada, is that I was tired of being that marginalized vote, right? That community that candidates and the party alike were coming to but usually every 4 years, and 2 months before whereas Bernie did not do that, right? Bernie consistently did that for at the least the last 4 years, but heavy in this last year.
And one of the key things we're going to see in these next primaries is whether that can be replicated with African Americans outside the South. So African Americans in the South, the numbers are something like 60% Biden. Bernie is pretty much right at the same number of that community that he was in 2016. What's the unknown thing is African Americans in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan.
Well, and
in
also the generational divide there between
there's
the Black
huge,
community as well,
huge
right?
generational
We
divide,
still have at least half, if not majority of the younger Black Americans that have come out for Bernie, and a very large majority, a supermajority of older Black Americans that have come out for Biden, right?
Those
so we
numbers
still have that
haven't moved
generational, right? So my point is that, look, if there is no expansion, there's not going to be a win. Period. That's just what it is. And so, how do we, as progressives, people who care and truly want to see these things happen, start to think about how we talk to one another, and how we are supportive of one another, and how we, ensure that we are investing the right amount of resources in these communities, because at the end of the day, that's the only way in which we're going to do this.
So, this is interesting because we talk about expanding the base, and on the previous panel, we discussed how Bernie has not been able to keep frankly, the older white vote in his camp while he expands the base. And you look back at 2016 between Trump and Hillary, and there was a lot of armchair analysis, but at the end of the day, what Donald Trump was able to do was mobilize a portion of the older white vote that voted for Barack Obama. At the same time, Hillary Clinton did not activate the base of working people, multi-generational, multi-racial working people who had turned out for Barack Obama. It wasn't necessarily the Obama coalition, but there were two factors there. And Bernie seems to have gotten one of them, and is not, what do you think, Nando? You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, it seems to me that just before the Iowa caucus, the Bernie campaign went hard at Joe Biden over Social Security. That's right. Social Security, it's frankly shocking that this is even an issue, but Biden has been repeatedly calling to cut Social Security his whole career. He's part of like this sort of elite bipartisan consensus, which is anyone, I'm sure you know these things. Like, if you've hung out with any sort of person that's in the establishment, either the Democratic or Republican parties, they take it as a given that you need to cut Social Security and Medicare in order not to, like, bankrupt the nation or something insane like that. And Bernie went after Biden hard just before the Iowa caucus, and it seemed to have an effect. It really knocked Biden down. Biden was leading the polls up until a week before the Iowa caucuses.
You mean David Sirota wasn't just spilling lies out on the internet?
He was, his horns came out and he was breathing fire, and he really hurt Biden. But then after that, they kind of quieted that attack, and I'm not quite sure why. But I feel like that's the you gotta hyper focus on it. Just hit him on Social Security.
Well, there's this other guy that came into the race with $400 million, and who had a very similar worldview, and he had to be taken care of and dealt with. And part of Bloomberg's presence in the race was a very big boon for Joe Biden, both on the way up and the way down.
Yeah. The Bloomberg, when the Bloomberg thing was happening, I woke up in a very, very dark place. I I really think, like, going from Trump to Bloomberg, and that's the end. We're toast. Like, we might as well just, I don't know.
It's
join a
illegitimate
yoga
good
cult or
thing
something.
that he fell on his face tonight.
Do you think that was a strategy, though? The conspiracy theorist in me is like, hey, this guy has all the money. Let's have money. No, but really.
Let's play conspiracy corner.
Let's play conspiracy. I'm in the corner here. but I live in New York, right? I lived in New York under Bloomberg. This is somebody who decided not to get into multiple races, just as Donald Trump had decided not to get into multiple races for president. And he had the money, and there were some people saying at the time in New York that he was just using it to be a walking, talking advertisement against the left. And even if he didn't move anywhere in the polls or collect delegates, and I did this with my reporting, I realized that he was actually spending all his money on his own companies. So instead of outsourcing to other vendors, 75% of the money that he was outsourcing to, that he was putting into vendors, was to his own companies.
That sounds familiar.
For his ad buys. Yeah.
This was the 5th time that Bloomberg had considered or flirted with a presidential race. And you look at his career and the fact that, he petitioned and managed to maneuver to get a 3rd term in New York City. This is someone who craved power.
We should have done a military coup.
And he craved power for himself. Everything you think about Trump is actually is magnified and manifested in Bloomberg. And so I believe he thought he had a shot. He looked at the data and he thought,
but was he a useful
idiot?
I hear you. Was he a useful idiot of the consultant class that just gets in these people's ears and no?
I don't.
I think Bloomberg is just a absolute cudgel to stop Bernie. There's no. He's like you said, he's flirted with running for president millions of times, and the one time he does is when Bernie was run away with the nomination. And when he threatened to run in 2016 as an independent, it was 100% to stop Bernie and ensure the
But he
Trump
did it
victory.
at a time when suddenly the fire could be taken away from Joe Biden. And at the time,
you're also trying to be very logical about a frame that we will never ever understand. To be an old privileged white man
We didn't get
with
invited to
billions
those
of
Disney Maxwell
dollars,
parties.
we can't even fathom what his existence is like. You know what I mean?
What happened was, this guy was on a
You've been invited to those
trajectory.
parties.
On occasion.
What we know is Bloomberg was going straight up. Warren destroyed him in the debate. Progressives kind of destroyed him and laid the groundwork for that. Biden ends up kind of being above the fray, isn't touched. And, you know, then James Clyburn says him, and that was it. And the field consolidated after that. Those things didn't all have to happen that way. Bloomberg could have, you know, bobbed and weaved and would have been a real problem.
Well, again, y'all, we're like, you know, missing the forest for the trees here. The fact of the matter is that spending money works. I talked to a friend of mine who, his mom earlier, a Latina living in Texas, an older woman, ended up voting for Bloomberg. And he was like, what just happened? Why? What happened? And when he asked her why, retired teacher, she said, because we have to beat Trump. And we are forgetting that is recently when we were asking voters what were the things that were most important to them, almost majority said it was beating Trump. Policy substance was at about 24%. So again, you guys, like, we have to stop being so, like, trying to be so logical about this. At the end of the day, we do have to think about how we meet voters where they're at and recognize that money still moves our politics. And if you have billions of dollars laying around, again, this is like, you know, in comparative terms, this is like me spending $100, right? That's how much money this man has. So if he knows that he's got a shot, to Nando's point, of protecting his livelihood and people around him, then yes, it's like, it's no big deal, let me do this. There's no conspiracy about it, right? Like, he knows it's effective, and unfortunately it still is.
He wants to run the party to Disney Maxwell. It's gonna happen.
It's an all-star cast that is coming for Bloomberg. Harvey Weinstein,
The best.
Jeffrey
They're all gonna have a fun
He's
party.
got surrogates that no one else has.
Judge Judy was the first endorsement for Michael Bloomberg. Michael Brooks and Justin Jackson have some things to say about this, so I'm going to invite them back up here. Come on up!
We have something to share.
Oh boy.
Justin's gonna play it for you. A little comedy. Ready?
You have this
You need to kind of explain it.
Maybe you cast the first stone. You know what I'm talking about. You know the thing.
Basically, Joe Biden is deeply senile. As the gentleman
It was a freaky Super Tuesday.
He's been watching too much sexual porn on Pornhub.
This is the late night version of the Nomiki show.
Nomiki after dark, everybody.
Oh man. Mom, Dad. Hey.
The Nomiki show.
No
Big
big deal.
hand to Nomiki's parents back there.
Seriously, they went here and they voted early. My dad's a full-on Bernie bro, and he is Francesca Fiorentini's biggest fan too. Okay, so aside from all of the creepy Joe Biden jokes that we're going to be making for the next 4 months, there is a real fear here in that the establishment is propping up somebody who, I'm sorry, can we just like stop for a second? This guy's going to run against Donald Trump. He has no movement. He had no money yesterday. He has no organization on the ground. He's not even going to be able to compete with 70-something-year-old Bernie Sanders on stage. If he can't win through democracy and he has to win through superdelegates, how is he going to win against Donald Trump? My question right now is basically, do the Democrats even fucking care about beating Donald Trump?
Hard no.
firmly believe this. The Democratic Party, either way, is dead. Either Bernie wins, and the way things are going, or the way things have gone is ends for them. The corrupt focus is in there, or Biden wins, they turn out deeply depressed, and it's pretty much a nonsense. So one way or the other, this party will die.
If enough people die of coronavirus, and the economic and social and public health fallout would actually propel Democrats to beat Trump. That's the bright side, everybody.
Well, you got corona.
It's actually very dark.
You got corona on the brain.
It's only corona, like they just make their
Well, the other problem with corona is that Trump,
Wash your hands,
Trump will use this potentially very effectively to run to basically reinforce his xenophobia. And there's already that tendency as well. So it's a conflict. Look, if it becomes an actual crisis, obviously will hurt Trump. But if it's somewhat managed and it doesn't affect people's travel plans, this could be another thing to mobilize his base.
Have you seen the CDC?
That's a great case for austerity. If Bernie Sanders wants to run against Joe Biden's policies, it's not just Medicare for all and not having to be able to afford the pharmaceuticals to treat coronavirus or anything else really to contain it. It's that he has run this country under austerity the way that Joe Biden would do as well.
Totally, but we just know that unless, and I, of course, the CDC, actually there's a book called Betrayal, it was published in 2000 about the collapse of global public health going back to the 80s. And I mean, so yes, and it could happen any moment. However, if it becomes a thing, like the government shutdown a couple of years ago, when it finally ended, was when airport travel got threatened.
Shout out Sarah Nelson.
So I think, shout out Sarah Nelson. So I could just as easily, I could see Trump having advantages in that as well. We'd be banking.
Here's the bigger problem. Container traffic from China, where all our stuff is made, is down about 20 to 25% in this month. You're going to have shortages on store shelves in America, and there's no kind of talking your way out of that.
Just like Venezuela, Jack.
I talked to Maduro, and I said, the store shelves got to be filled with all kinds of diapers and Kool-Aid and all that fun stuff, Jack, and how the Venezuelans are going to starve.
SNL is looking for a new Biden, so here it is.
They would let him on there.
But yeah, I mean, the economic fallout of this.
If it goes like that, it will obviously.
That is not bullshittable by Donald Trump.
I mean, even judging by his entire campaign was based on, well, the economy's running smoothly now. Well, it's not.
That's correct.
And it was based off of Wall Street, and it's not.
That's correct.
And I just don't think that Joe Biden has a message. And I think that Bernie Sanders, if he is the alternative to Joe Biden at this point, which it's very clear he is, he has to get that message out there. And this is why I'm going to be tough on the Sanders campaign. You got to get that message out there. If you are for fighting democracy within the Democratic Party, you should be for protecting democracy up against Trump. And that includes fighting austerity, fighting for Medicare for all, explaining what it means when we're facing the threats of Ebola, what trade means under Ebola, Ebola, Man! I was on a roll here.
I mean, but let's also be very honest about the way in which, not about the bubonic plague. It's a very long time ago.
The grip.
Do you remember the bubonic plague?
I was there for the bubonic plague. I tried to free Nelson Mandela from the
I was the guy who said, "You're going to stop this plague," because I was there and I said, "In fact, we will stop it." My time's up.
While he had the bubonic plague, while he was
I saved several young women from bubonic plague.
Touching their hair.
Let's stop there so we don't go down that slippery slope. I'm doing this for your benefit. You're welcome.
Nomiki's parents are
Yeah, the women are always coming to save the day. Actually, that was the point I was going to make. If there has been any hits at all against Bloomberg and others, Warren was the one who did it. And it is true. What we need Bernie to do is to start doing the exact same thing. Because let's be real, Bernie has been, you know, he calls Biden his longtime friend, and, you know, frankly, I was a little disappointed when he did not stand by Zephyr, teach out.
I agree.
I was disappointed when he also did not stand by Nina. When Nina,
you're right.
And so, you know, look, if we're gonna do this, we do need some backbone in this, right? Yes. And so ultimately, it is you know, for, I guess, you know, at some point I'm joining the team, right? But
You're welcome. Welcome back. We thought this was going to be a really tense segment between you and Michael, and she's like, no.
She's saying that he should attack people, which I love.
Right, you know, that I mean, frankly, like, again, I'm about winning, all right? I'm about moving forward. I'm not about, like, rehashing the past and, like, you know, people should have done this and whatever, all right? Like, and frankly, I was not treated very well when I came out and endorsed Warren, okay? I was literally kicked off social media for 3 days because of all the terrible ways in which I was treated on social media and, frankly, sometimes in real life.
David was pretty aggressive.
Sorry so let's be, you know, again, but do I give a shit about it?
And let's be, you also got that from the people who were defending Biden. So that's something, the way you were attacked.
So I get it from the establishment and I get it from my own people. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so we gotta stop that shit. We gotta stop it. And we need to move past it and know that there is like some very real shit there at stake, right? And like, so that's what I'm focused on 1,000%. So frankly, I'm not here to argue with David, right?
Michael, David's here.
Wow,
just white guys.
Whatever. I'm not here to argue with anybody, right? I'm
We
here.
do white Ben Affleck, right?
I am here to try to hopefully say, let's all try to make Bernie a better candidate. And let's try to make ourselves better. And let's try to figure out how we fucking win. That's it.
This is a moment, though. I mean, I think we were expecting a different night a couple of days ago. I emailed you all. We're going to be celebrating to late hours in the morning.
Champagne.
Popping the kombucha and champagne. But we are having a tough talk right now about what it takes to win. And you know, we said this. We're on the Majority Report last week, doing election night results, and even then, even though that Bernie was doing very well in Nevada, he still needed to solidify his white working class base. And there needs, every campaign, every presidential campaign goes through some shifts. And I don't think that Bernie has had that. And to some extent it's great because there's loyalty and there's consistency and there's consistency of surrogates and message. But to get past the base, we gotta speak to the folks that aren't necessarily our comrades, because that's how you're gonna win an election. And I think that's something that I think you had said this, that the corporatists have solidarity and they expand willingly as soon as there's an opportunity. So what is it gonna take? I mean, Michael, you're the one who was always like talking about strategy. What's it gonna take? What message do we need to put out there?
Well, I mean, this is why we need to analyze like the mistakes that they've made and what has come before. I mean, we need some historical understandings of things, but I don't know genuinely what the hesitation is, whether it is on differentiating with Warren in the beginning, or as an example, more recently and more relevantly last week, it didn't even hit me because I'm so used to him, I think, doing solid jobs, but not doing enough, frankly, that he didn't say to Joe Biden in South Carolina, he didn't call him his friend. That's not what I'm talking about, but like, this guy wants to cut Social Security. When he's going into the presidency, because that's even another thing that's just the wrong frame in my opinion. People always like, Joe Biden's such an idiot. He says that we can work with Republicans. What you actually should think of is Joe Biden can work with Republicans, because what he means is Mitch McConnell will say, if Joe Biden wins, Mitch McConnell will be like, you know what, sorry, we shouldn't say overtly racist things, and Biden, like, win. And then they'll come out and they'll be like, and now we're gonna do these 21st century budget responsibility acts. And we're gonna phase in Medicare and Social Security cuts. So I think that, I think that Bernie just needs to actually, in some ways, weirdly double up on what he's accused of, but just make it much more simple, which is this dude wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. He's got a problem-filled record. It's riddled with ways of hitting him. And subtly, like, he can't say it, but they do have to make some ads that show decline. And I joke about it all day. I find it actually literally sad and unpleasant to watch. But I think
What specifically?
Joe Biden declining. But it needs to be
Mentally,
highlighted.
to be clear, not
mentally, physically, like and so I think that they just need whatever the hesitation is to go simple and go clear. And again, not do these. That thing about Biden and Republicans is such a superficial document, and that is the type of thing that drives me fucking crazy because everyone, oh, what an idiot. No, he's actually being quite clear. That's his politics. His politics, they'll team up and make cuts. So explain why that's the plan instead of smugly laughing at it.
I find this kind of interesting. So Biden's schedule tomorrow. You know, you'd think like, so Tuesday's over, time to move on.
What time does he get his jello?
He's speaking here tomorrow.
In this
state. He's actually running the Nomiki show. He's speaking in LA.
In fact, to have a
and then in the evening, he has what they call a Biden for President finance event in Los Angeles. He's here for money, and he's staying here. And you know, we saw this in 2016 when Hillary Clinton spent half the presidential general election dialing for dollars and going to big fundraisers.
So this to me signals that, as somebody who used to be on finance committees for the Obama campaign in California, actually, this signals that they knew this was clearly their plan, and they knew this was coming. It's not easy to put together these fundraisers. They knew that certain candidates were going to drop out, and he was going to do well in South Carolina. We knew. It wasn't like a secret. We knew this was going to happen. I just worry that even though we knew he was going to win in South Carolina and in the South, and he was going to have momentum and the press on his side, and the extra candidates out there endorsing him, that we were not prepared for our next steps. We've been talking about brokered conventions and delegates, and you and I dealt with this very closely firsthand on the Unity Reform Commission, but how do you counter-message the momentum of the inevitable candidate who will take it to broker? I mean, the media has just said, oh yeah, it's a brokered convention. No question.
I mean, I don't know that that's so true anymore when you have two people left that are going to fight over 60% of the delegate. I mean,
well, it's a brokered convention. If you don't get to 1991, it's a brokered convention.
It is, but I don't know.
Delegates,
I think the base case for that actually happening has gone down after tonight. Especially as everyone expects, you get to one-on-one.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm saying that there's 60% of all the delegates are outstanding, right? And you have only two people left who can get delegates. And so, even though, despite the proportional, character of that, if one knocks the other out, which is very possible over the next couple months, it raises the opportunity because, Warren Bloomberg and all the others, they just didn't get that many delegates tonight. So, we're getting closer to a 50-50 split here, and that means that 1991 was achievable, I think, for Biden and Sanders.
I think at this point, Warren has to endorse Bernie. Like she just has to. Like she has to. She must do it. She has.
Let's ask the Warren surrogate.
There's no right. It has to happen. There's no path forward.
What does Adam Green say to you?
Sorry. Give him money.
I know. Adam's a friend.
He's been texting me all night, guys. No.
I just think, just as a...
You guys, again, like, what the hell, dude? Like, we're on the one, we're on the same team, too. Yes, we are. I mean, Jesus Christ, y'all, if we're gonna win, like, we're just gonna be like, all right, like, what is the strategy in which we do this with, right? Like, now, with Warren drops out or not, I have no idea. I don't. Does she have a viable path? Clearly, no, right? Like, any person can see that. And so what are we going to do then? Are we going to obsess about whether or not she's gonna drop or not? Or do you double down? You can. Or do you double down on, again, the expansion conversation, right? Like, we're gonna like literally waste all of this energy and effort in fighting with her and whatever surrogates and supporters she still has left, when instead we should be focusing on how to bring in more people. That doesn't seem like a good use of energy.
And
to
the fair
me.
point here is, and I
Does
think
that seem like a good use of energy?
No, it doesn't. I agree with you on that. And I think what she so effectively did a couple of months ago, this wasn't you, but that she effectively did, was she used that Bernie bro narrative, which I think solidified a group of her supporters, not like you, in any criticism of the Warren campaign, but putting us against each other, essentially. So that we demand she drops out, and then that pushes back on them, thinking we're Bernie bros. And so it created this tension, and now we're in a state where we don't know how to communicate with the segment of Warren supporters who might be able to come into our circle, who are not like you, because there are people who are very toxic online that are supporting Warren.
Certainly in both camps.
Right, no,
I
agree. I think I'm a little bit more, and I'm the recipient of a lot of this hate. But what I'm saying is, she is a different coalition, and some of that coalition, frankly, is Hillary Clinton supporters who we may never have one.
Sure.
And might need this time around. I don't know how to communicate with those people because I've been fighting them for 5 years, frankly.
Well, and like, again, that's my point, right? Is that the effort has to be made, and the people that you don't bring along, don't bring them along. You know what I mean? Like, that's my point, is that
We can't win that way.
but you can, if you're focusing on the folks who are open and amenable to your message.
Meet them where they are.
And the folks who have yet to come on board. There is a significant amount of people that we can still bring on board, particularly in communities of color. As I noted earlier, the best example right now is the Latino community, right? That we can still focus on in order to get to these numbers that frankly are still possible.
Justin, what are you thinking? I feel your energy. I feel like you got something to say here.
I mean, I think the energy it takes to get people that already aren't necessarily paying attention to the race is a lot. I think it takes a lot of resources to go out there and get those people. I think the hundreds of thousands of people that are already voting for Warren, albeit you may not get all of them, but even if you get a percentage of them, then that would be something that would really help our coalition, because she is getting hundreds of thousands of votes in some of these places. So like, even though she's only getting, 12-13%, that's hundreds of thousands of people.
She got 1.4 million votes.
There you go.
We saw like when Pete and Amy dropped out, when Pete and Klobuchar dropped out, and they kind of immediately turned out, when supported Biden full-throatedly, and they were, all those supporters, not all of them probably, but like a huge chunk of them went to Biden because he overperformed all the polling, and you saw like overnight polls from right before Super Tuesday, a giant spike in his support, and it's because people often follow political leaders. Like, it's not just political leaders following voters; it's a give and take. If a person has a huge amount of social capital and a huge amount of political capital, there is potential to sway all these people. So, there's like a lot of talk of that, Warren's supporters might not go to Bernie or whatever, and it's like, well, if she were to really go to the match for Bernie, then they will.
I will say though, not to bring it down, but whenever we needed Liz to have Bernie's back, she hasn't. So what are we gonna do to, change that?
Can I just
so
add,
that she will?
Can I just
I
add?
don't know.
I mean, right. I think that's just objectively true, but I think whatever. I said what I thought about, and I think frankly, if the Sanders campaign had a more professional approach to campaigning, which includes differentiating, which by the way does not necessarily mean going like radically negative. It just means differentiating. I actually think some of the dynamics, like you put people like Nomiki and I in a position where we have to do like the videos on Warren because the campaign won't talk about it.
Oh yeah.
I was the first one. I was like, okay, I will talk. Look, I'm sorry. I have a problem for voting for Trump's military budgets. I'm sorry. I know it's very broad of me. I have a problem with not calling for free media. I have a problem with that. And their theories of change are different, and their backgrounds are different. And in fact, I think if the campaign had a more, both of them came out and said, actually, we have different politics, we have a different theory, and we're just going to argue it, that would be very clean and very healthy. You had this thing where Bernie wouldn't, anyways, whatever. More broadly, I just think that, and this actually shows up with the Warren thing too, because then conversely, the Bernie campaign was way too obsessed with competing for vote points online with Warren. This doesn't affect, no normal people care about this stuff at all.
It's not going to work with Biden though.
And
You
it's
go full throttle.
I
Full throttle with Biden.
always thought that it was going to be a Sanders-Biden race at the end of the day, and the way you actually beat Biden. And even frankly, the way he could, I think, be somewhat aggressive towards Warren, but in a way that would maybe scoop some people up, is just to say, like, why didn't he just say for a couple weeks, look, it's unfortunate that Liz is attacking me like that. I still like her, I respect her. But if you want a progressive agenda, there's one person left in the game who will do it. That's me, and will come support me. And this guy wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, and I don't think he has enough finesse to even spin the Ukraine story when Trump goes out.
So I was on a show today and I got criticized because, you know, when you go on these shows, as all of us know, you get to hear their talking points and what's being spun out. And it's amazing to watch it in real time because the Fox News right wing have the same exact talking points as the Biden surrogates on the same day.
Ooh. Conspiracy theory.
It's not a conspiracy theory. No, baby.
Let's get into that one.
Verbatim. Verbatim. It wasn't like, it was verbatim. And I mean, that's concerning to me when you see consultants for Michael Bloomberg saying the same thing. And I mentioned in this conversation with a surrogate for Biden that Trump is going to bring up Ukraine. And immediately he went to this point, well, Bernie Sanders needs to be a good Democrat. He's not a good Democrat if he's using Republican talking points.
Whoa.
And I said...
First of all, Biden is guilty on Ukraine. Like, Trump is right about that. Like, he's guilty. Like, what is Hunter Biden doing to do a better job
I think one of the things, though, that we also, and it's a little, you know, maybe at odds to what Justin was saying earlier about the demise of the Democratic Party, I thought of it because of the point you just made, Nomi, is that, ultimately, Bernie is running to be the head of the Democratic Party. And if he wins, then he will be the leader of the Democratic Party, right? Not the Independent Party, not the whatever party, the Democratic Party. And so there does have to be some forward-thinking planning about how you do have a unifying message, because ultimately people do want that. When we talk about the fact that the vast majority of people out there want to vote for and voted for the person they thought was best to defeat Trump, a big part of that is about how we unify. So that, again, I don't know. If he doesn't win, I think the Democratic Party survives simply because our structure is built in such a way where it is a two-party system, and that's just the way it works, right? Like, there has to be a Democratic Party. Now, whether or not, there's the potential for a third party to come into existence, et cetera, and turns us into something that's a lot more similar to other countries, other, especially European countries. But at the end of the day, that, frankly, is kind of like we haven't gotten to that space yet, right?
About that,
Bernie has to run as the unifier and the person that is ultimately going to be the leader of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but you could also say the same thing about the Republican Party, whereas Trump ran against the Republican Party. He became the head of the Republican Party, but that party was forever changed. So that, in the same way, that's what I'm saying about the Democratic Party. Of course, it's still going to be called the Democratic Party.
Right.
as how it exists now, how it functions now, will fundamentally change either way.
The ecosystem of consultants and strategists and near attendants of the world, like, will.
Well, and of course, that's why they said, oh, we better team up to stop this. This juggernaut is going to put us out of a job. I mean, that's why that's not a conspiracy. That's just how things
That
are.
is
under
and in the hood.
That is also literally the definition of a conspiracy. But it's just
Look, David, you shut up over there. You're being really rude.
Hey, Mike, shut the fuck up. Hey, can I just say, doesn't Joe Biden kind of give off a vibe of like a guy who, after all he's accomplished, resents the fact that he's invited to Epstein's Island?
Biden is so.
I was the guy, and I wasn't invited.
Well, you know.
MPNA was just like, no,
doing in the 90s when like all this was going down, like with Slick Willie in the White House and all the fun stuff, like Biden wasn't invited to any of that.
So that's the crazy part of this. They hate Biden. So the fact that they're propping him up, I mean, that's the secret. Like, no one really liked him. He was like that annoying guy who kept running for president, kept stealing, slogans and speeches. But in the establishment,
lying about his SAT scores.
Lying about his SAT scores.
was like, don't invite to Epstein's Island.
It's true. I mean, he wasn't a member of the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council. He was only chosen because of a political situation for Obama. But listen, Obama's team is not on Biden's team right now. That's Biden's team.
Do you think?
Keep that in mind here.
But back to this notion of the demo, like, I think what you have is you do have, we have a two-party system, and then because it's a two-party system, sure, Republicans might be a couple of different parties in Europe, and Democrats might be multiple parties in Europe, and so you have these coalitions that hang together, and I think the Republicans are actually figuring out a way of bringing in a certain working class constituency, primarily through xenophobia, although that's going to change. They're going to start, especially if they run against Biden,
not just
rhetorically, it's going to change in terms of, like, Tucker Carlson just did it could be a Bernie video on Biden's record with MPNA and the bankruptcy bill. It's totally.
That's not isolated.
It's not
He's
isolated.
been doing that night after night after night.
And look at Josh Hawley in Missouri. Everybody should be following him very, very closely. What that guy talks about in terms of tech monopolies and Wall Street and how that affects agriculture and all this stuff. The Democratic Party is a coalition of people who really need empowerment and support, the most exploited and oppressed people in society, and suburban affluents who are like, no, I'm a good person. I like Fela Kuti. And a
He
handful
didn't
of
turn out for
oligarchs.
Hillary. That's the crazy thing. Those were the constituents that Hillary and Biden are going to try to win over. And they were the constituents that, despite what they tried to do, still turned out for Donald Trump and their wives, the white wives. I say this because everyone's like, white women won Trump the election, but it was really upper class white women that were voting with their husbands and traditionally have. When polled, they were asked, did you vote with your partner or husband? And they said yes. And they were the voters that Hillary Clinton tried to target and she couldn't get. But we've never been able to get that demo. So why do we think we're going to be able to do it now and trade them out for the working people? And they're trying again with Joe Biden.
In 2016, I watched a Trump rally in Michigan in which he said, it used to be that we made cars in Flint and you couldn't drink the water in Mexico. Now, they make the cars in Mexico and you can't drink the water in Flint. And I was like, he's running against the brazen plutocrat like Hillary Clinton, and he's going to win the election. Like, seeing that kind of economic populist message to the Republicans is absolute suicide. Like, it's just frankly shocking that they would think Joe Biden could be the one to counter that.
But he's from Pennsylvania.
He's from,
And he says Malarkey.
Delaware.
I think fundamentally he's potentially worse than Hillary because his record is so much more right-wing that Trump can just easily run to his left. And you know it. And he'll say shit that doesn't mean anything because he's not going to institute any of those policies, but he'll say it, and people eat it up.
David, real quick, let's do some last final
Sure.
results, and then we're gonna wrap up the evening because we gotta go out there and knock on doors.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
I think Target, Michigan, a week from today is the Michigan primary. It is the first state that's really critical to the general election that is on the presidential primary calendar. And there's, if you really want to see Bernie Sanders become the nominee of this party, Michigan is the only thing that matters, in my view.
Whoa.
Why?
Why?
Sorry. I mean, I know it mattered in 2016, but why doesn't Texas matter as much as Michigan?
I'm saying going forward. Obviously, these things matter. We're going to have about an even delegate split. But rhetorically, if you can say, I won the places that are going to be all that matters in the general election, that is an inroad to say that I am more electable, and that's the only thing that matters. Apparently, people want to, beat Trump. So that's my point. So this is funny. Places where Mike Bloomberg played well tonight include Pitkin County, Colorado, where Aspen is.
Of course.
Summit County, Utah, home of Park City, Utah. And Napa County, home of California wine country. That's Bloomberg country right there. I do have an update on the California 25th district election. This is probably just early balloting, but there was a poll that was running around about how Christy Smith was at 30% and Jake was at 5%, and the Republicans were in the middle, and that's where we're at. So Christy Smith has about 31% of the vote. Steve Knight and Mike Garcia, were the Republicans, are within 25% in that range, and Jake's at 4.7%. So that's the early vote, and it doesn't have to be the end of the story, but that's the trajectory that.
Can I quote some? I don't know if this is exactly your tweet, but it hit me really hard a few months ago. You tweeted something out along the lines of, when they see you coming, they'll organize against you. And the reason why AOC, one of the reasons why she's so effective, and she's brilliant, of course, but they didn't see her coming, and she won by
They intentionally ignored her.
They intentionally ignored her.
Yeah.
But when they see someone like Lucy Flores or Jake or so many other progressives who have stepped up and run that were more notable and could raise the money, there's like stages. They go after, first they ignore you, right? Then you're able to get on the ballot, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna sue you and we're gonna make you go broke. Your campaign go broke, and we're gonna try to get you off the ballot. Then you stay on the ballot. Then they're like, we're gonna prevent you from getting on the debate stage. Okay, you got on the debate stage. Now we're gonna silence you. And then they start the smears and the attacks and the legal threats, and you've been through that, I've been through that. I think Jake's going through a version of that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the things that I think moving forward is that yes, specifically in regards to Bernie and any progressive moving forward, is that they are going to be prepared, right? They will throw everything possible at it. And because of the way, the nature of our political system, money does still matter very much. The ability to communicate at large with communities still matters very much. And the person, and mainstream media matters very much, right? That's the reason why these narratives oftentimes don't break through, and why the whole Biden inevitability continues to be a thing. So I think that moving forward, it is absolutely about staying steadfast focused on organizing and continuing to grow where we see growth. And so moving forward, I don't necessarily agree that Michigan is the most important place, right? I do think that we need to continue to look at places like Arizona and Florida, and
They're going to be important. They're just on the 17th. I'm saying next week.
right.
Take it 1 week at a time.
Correct. But what do you do in the meantime with that additional week? You continue to organize and continue to, because ultimately it's a
Occupy
delegate
Chris
race.
Matthews' show. It's vacant, that's not. I thought Chris Matthews.
I vote for Ronaldo to take over that.
I'll happily quote Tip O'Neill.
Just go Tip O'Neill.
Quote Tip O'Neill. We'll call it Tip O'Neill hour.
Isn't this
just like tripping you? Is it?
Let's go through real quick final thoughts for everybody. Michael, let's start with you and your Timbonial impression, or Chris Matthews impression. Chris Matthews impression.
We don't have the luxury of cynicism. There's a lot at stake here, and I actually really think, for what it's worth, I'm confident, even with the conflict and disagreement, which is fine, and we should all get more comfortable with, I think, that people here actually generally care about this stuff, and because it matters. I mean, there's people not having health care, there's people who are homeless, there's people who are, and not to do a whole melodramatic thing, but like that, some of that stuff has been very close to me and my own family. And then of course we have the coronavirus coming as well. And a variety of other very, very serious problems. So I would leave you with, cut the lack of nutrition out as much as possible. Like, it really is okay to take a break from the news cycle, Twitter, and all this fucking bullshit that all of us participate in constantly. And take care of yourself, take a step back, and then the antidote to anxiety is work. And these upcoming campaigns with states all matter immensely, and we have a real chance. And even if this doesn't happen, you'll certainly have people up here trying to think creatively and strategically about how we actually handle these things and move forward for the greatest good of all. And I'm just honored you all came out, and thank you for having me, and bless.
Yeah, just keep fighting. I think a lot of this stuff is going to come down to narratives. I think the delegates will be, will definitely be within striking distance. And yeah, it's just going to come down to narratives, and so just keep fighting. I think one positive is now that Joe's will be the front runner potentially. He's going to have to debate. He's going to have to be on the debate stage. He's going to have to talk, which we know that he can't do. So that's a positive. So let's go
and he'll get half the time to talk.
Right. Yeah, he's going to have to talk more.
You can't hide.
Like, can't say my time.
You go ahead.
Right.
I'm out of time.
Yeah. So just keep fighting.
Lucy.
Yeah, no. Okay. I don't have that much more to add. I do think, though, that we have to stay super laser focused and just remember that everything that Biden does moving forward and that we think is completely awful and that he's messing up and that he has this horrific track record and it continues. Like when you think about all of the ways in which it should be obvious to everyone, remind yourself that it's not, right? And that's right. And never look down on people who, in your mind, don't get it or are too stupid to understand or whatever. Like that's not how we're going to win. And that's why I say we have to stay laser focused on trying to find where we meet that person, regardless of where they're at. And if we manage to do that, this is winnable. This delegate map is winnable. We just cannot take anything for granted or make any kind of assumptions about the things that we think are logical or apparent, because they're just not.
I go back to heightening the contradictions. I mean, it's been incredibly clear in the last 48 hours that the Democratic Party would rather lose to Trump than to give you the most mild form of social democracy that any European citizen just enjoys on a day-to-day basis in blissful ignorance, and they don't even want to let you have that. They don't want to give you an inch. And that's just become, I mean, if it wasn't clear already, which it was kind of in your head, now you've seen it fully masked off. Like, this is just, they've really shown their hand, you know, and everyone from Joe Biden to Barack Obama to Hillary Clinton to all these awful people, they all want to prevent you from living a better life and from living a better world. And all this talk about them wanting to defeat Trump and how horrified they are of Trump, they're more horrified of you having a better life. So that is, for me, who we have to be more as focused on, as much as Trump, like when they try to browbeat you, they're like, no, you are the real impediment. You are the impediment from us getting from here to a better world.
I want to thank you, Nomiki, thanks to the whole crew here, and thanks to you guys for sticking around for hours. Really appreciate you. Thanks for being here. I've been at this for, longer than I care to admit. I think I started blogging in 2004. And, I've seen a ton of ups and downs, parts where I thought we as a movement had figured this out and realized that we didn't. These were things that have been going on since much longer than I was involved in this game. We've been through 40 years of stagnant wages and neoliberal ideology, and it wasn't going to turn around in a flash. There's no eureka moment for the American public, and particularly for Washington. There's no moment to turn the battleship completely around in a second. This is there's a quote about how politics is the slow boring of hard boards, that it takes time and effort and sometimes so much time that you want to just give it up and reject it. And that's really, part of the plan from those in the dominant class. So you need to just keep doing the work of the slow boring of hard boards. And there's a path here to a better world, and it may be tough, may be challenging, it may have a lot of people in your way, a lot of obstacles, but it really is achievable. And the only way I know that it's not achievable is if you stop by it.
What Mondo was saying, because it made me think about it. I saw a stat earlier that over 70% of, or in some cases even higher, and some states lower, of people that are in favor of Medicare for all. And that is such a very, very clear distinction between Biden and Bernie in terms of, like, Biden has been very clear he is about protecting and quote unquote expanding, whatever the hell that means, Obamacare. Right? And yet the vast majority of people in this country want Medicare for all. And yet some of those states where 70% of the people went for Medicare for all voted for Biden. So just to underscore, this distinctions and the fact that we have to just keep hammering on these things, because to the point that was just made, it is about the constant just getting at it, and getting at it. And it's literally going to be that until, who knows?
Forever. You're not allowed out of this. Forever. You aren't. You can't just pick up and leave. There's never that moment. That moment does not exist anymore. Now that you are in this movement, you can't get out. And if you do get out, then we all lose.
TMBS Barbados.
Well, I hear that Michael Bloomberg selling his house in Barbados, which he used to.
Stay
We get
tuned
that.
for Bloomberg tweets upcoming. I just got a Venmo transaction. Fuck all of you.
$10,000? I heard that's the going rate.
Way less.
What's it?
2,500. It's gonna go down after tonight. First, more than anything, I just want to thank each and every one of you, and Alona and Francesca, for coming tonight. This is a huge commitment. Michael's jet lagged, I'm a little bit jet lagged, less so than you. Long night, not the results that I think any of us wanted, but what David said is right. We can't give up. We don't have time. And I say that because this thing called climate change is something that we're not in denial about, but those who are making money off of exacerbating the effects of climate change, which are just affecting the most vulnerable communities, but they're affecting even Mike Bloomberg's house in Barbados. It's affecting everybody, and I think we have to remember specifically those non-negotiables that are on the line. It's not just the 30% of people, it's the coronavirus, which is going to affect every single one of us. It's climate change that's going to affect every single one of us, and it is affecting every single one of us. And as much as the monopolies, that's such a wonky word, right? As much as the monopolies and the oligarchs and the consultant class are controlling everything right now, the chessboard, what I want to remind you all is just 4 years ago, we built a movement that had been growing beneath the surface, right? But it happened very rapidly, and they didn't see it coming. And despite all of that, I actually will say, last time around, we were in a worse situation at this point. You know, Hillary Clinton had every single person on cable news supporting her and laughing at us. She had every single superdelegate, for the most part, locked up a year and a half in advance, blocking Joe Biden. She had every single Democratic Party in non-open primary states, which is like 4, locked in for her. She had the whole entire chessboard, and Bernie Sanders still got 43% of the vote going into the Democratic, the convention. But with that being said, you guys are a lot more aware now. I mean, we all are. We learned through the Unity Reform Commission that most DNC members didn't even know what was going on. Well, now most DNC members do, and they're ready to reform, and they almost got Keith Ellison. It's those little moments when we didn't organize just enough that they pull the shenanigans. It's why knocking on doors, making phone calls, talking to people that are outside of our immediate universe, and I think Lucy's absolutely correct. We have to learn how to speak to people that are outside of our core. Meet them where they are. If they're for Medicare for all but voted for Biden, how do we move them over? If it's about electability, we have to remind everybody that Bernie Sanders has organized in every single community in America. And to defeat Donald Trump, who's consolidated the Republican Party, the Koch brothers funded Republican Party that has worked in every single community, to defeat him, we need a movement to match that. We need a movement that is of actual working people. We need to remind them, you want electability? Somebody can defeat Donald Trump. Not only does Bernie Sanders defeat him in the polls, but Bernie Sanders is going to win through democracy. The entire strategy, even right at this moment, of Joe Biden is through superdelegates, and that's not democracy. It's to divide. That's what they want us to do. So this was a moment today where we thought we were going to do better. We still won California. And as California goes, so goes the country. But we can't give up on talking to people outside of our immediate universe. And so moving forward, if I can just offer my wisdom, pay attention to the process, pull back the curtain, share it with your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, whoever you need to win over. Be nice to our foreign friends.
Please be nice.
I mean,
stop sending us stick emojis.
Yeah, I think we need to retire the stick emoji at this point. That's just my say. And even the peak people. I mean, a lot of these candidates, their second choices were Bernie.
Absolutely,
And so something,
1,000%. Yeah.
but something happened.
Do not take it for a given that that all of these folks from these other people automatically went to Biden.
It's a weird electorate.
Very weird electorate.
We got to expand it, and we need to start winning over those voters who Donald Trump is still speaking to every single day. So I want to thank all of you for being here, for knocking on doors, for making phone calls, for subscribing to us on YouTube, The Nomiki Show, new show. and being patrons, patreon.com/the Nomiki show. That's my only plug tonight. I need to follow Michael, he's much better at this. Because that's how we do these events, and we're gonna do more of them. Thank you all, thank you to everyone.